And we're back, ready for another excellent day of Junior Speed Chess Championship action. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess, alongside me, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Danya, I know this is the matchup that you've been waiting for. Nihal Sarin takes on Anton Smirnov.
Robert, I'm still recovering from yesterday's match, but I mean recovering in the best possible way, and I cannot wait for this match to get underway. The best type of recovery in terms of watching JSCC matches, well, guess what it is? It's watching another amazing JSCC match, and we have one on our hands today. This is going to be incredible.
Oh, and we have a stellar one ahead for you. Nihal Sarin, the top seed in the JSCC, and he takes on Anton Smirnov, who will not go down without a huge fight if he is indeed going to lose this matchup, because I don't think that's the case. However, the Smarter Chess predictions, they have Nihal Sarin at a 68% favorite here. So what do you make of that, Donna? Do you agree with the numbers? I know Nihal Sarin is so highly rated on Chess.com server.
Well, this is interesting, and we'll break this down further as the match goes along. But notice that Smarter Chess is predicting an even match essentially all the way up to the bullet. And Nihal, we will talk about this, is incredible at bullet. He's one of the highest rated bullet players on the site. And some of you will fall out of your chairs. Presumably you're sitting on chairs or out of your bed when you see his rating. So that makes some sense. But I also want to put things in context. I think that Anton is also an incredibly strong bullet player. So as usual, I think that the match is going to be a little bit closer than the prediction, but we've seen Smarter Chess be on the money essentially time and time again.
We certainly have, and no matter who loses this match, they have a chance to qualify for the Speed Chess Championship anyway, because the winner of the JSCC gets in directly, but there will be the Speed Chess Super Swiss this coming weekend, October 3rd and 4th, a $15,000 prize fund just for the weekend's events, but also the Speed Chess Championship has a $100,000 prize pool, so there's a lot of money at stake, a lot of pride, and of course, just great chess ahead.
There absolutely is, and we see Anton drinking his coffee. I mean, I don't know if that is coffee, but is it too early to drink coffee? But I think it's really early for Anton. I think we discussed this the last time he was playing. He's definitely a trooper. And I think he mentioned going to sleep early to make it to the match to get some sleep. And Nihal, of course, is the kind of opponent that you need to do that for. He's a beast.
He definitely is. And we were singing the praises of our contestants yesterday in Arjun Ergasi and Jeffrey Zhang. And Nihal Sarin was probably looking over that match and being like, these guys are good, but you see me? You see me? Now, he's a pretty chill kid, but he is the most highly rated player in the field in terms of online play. In terms of classical chess, that is Jeffrey Zhang's honor. So how do you make that distinction, especially between these two players that we have in front of us today? Anton Smirnov, his rating hovers around 2,600 classical FIDE. Nihal Sarin, younger, and he's on the rise, and I think he's slightly higher rated than Anton Smirnov is.
Yes, and they are both very good positional players as the games get underway. That is what has always impressed me, particularly about Nihal's games over the board, but also, of course, about Anton's games. How solid they are, how good at positional chess they are, how infrequently they commit, mistakes in the positional realm, in technique. So I think this will not only be a tactical battle, as it always is in these rapid games, but it will also be a positional battle. And I think a lot of the games will be decided on the basis of who can outmaneuver the opponent. And of course, openings will also play a big role. So I'm very excited to see what kind of openings they're going to play. And in the first game, Robert, they have a Queen's Gambit declines and a Carlsbad structure.
They do. And this A6 move I was highlighting because then Black was ready to take on C4 and play B5. Now this B5 move doesn't make as much sense because you are overextending your pawns on the queen side. So Bishop came to E6. That's the benefit for Black of White having captured on D5 is you were able to capture with your E pawn and give your bishop some space.
Correct. And there's that pawn on A6, which is it redundant? Not entirely, because in these positions, White has a very typical plan of sending that B pawn down, what's called a minority attack. And that pawn on A6 can potentially act kind of like a spike. This is completely random, but many, many years ago, I watched this History Channel documentary about how they buried vampires to make sure they didn't rise back out of their grave. And they would put these spikes above the tombstone. Those pawns on A6 and C6 kind of like those spikes preventing that B pawn from rushing forward to B5. Okay, I'm done.
I can always trust you. No,
Goodbye.
That was good. No.
Okay.
I like that one. That was really good. So
yeah, I think it was.
I like when you make these kind of references. And here C6 was played, but Danya, Black also had the opportunity to play c5 instead of c6, and still does have that opportunity at some point. So how do you make that choice? Like when you play c6, which is more solid, playing in the style of the Carlsbad structure, versus playing c5, which looks like is the intention now the rook is on c8.
I found that, one's tendency to procrastinate in real life bleeds over into the chess realm. So timing c5 is indeed very important. You want to make sure that after you've played c5, you aren't saddled with that weakness on d5, right? You want to make sure that the activity of your pieces compensates for the weakness that you create. And I think that's exactly what Anton is trying to make sure of. I think he's already pretty much well, prepared for c5. I don't think that's necessary. I mean, you could play without c5 here. You could play b5 and then c5, but you could play c5 here as well. So it's largely a question of stage. Rook e8, bishop f8 also comes to mind. If you wait too long, though, my question is, what exactly is Nihal going to do? How is he going to improve his position if Anton delays c5?
It's one of these moments where you sometimes you're thinking too much about what your opponent is up to, because right here c5 looks like a reasonable move and he plays rook e8 bishop f8, but he's just saying, well, what next? What are you going to do? And it is a good question, because I don't see a clear plan for white. Are you going to play e4 yourself? That has drawbacks, of course, of giving yourself an isolated pawn. He plays bishop h2. Is that to play knight e5 at some point and then pawn to f4? It's another very good question. So I think that Anton trying not to commit himself to a plan, because c5 does leave him with the isolated pawn. And now for Nihal, I mean, Danya, I would play knight e5, but I can also understand why you'd refrain from doing that, as trades could be beneficial for black.
Yep, and queen b1 I think is a very nice move. We talked about the positional prowess of both of these players when we see b5. The queen steps away from the c file, which makes sense. If the c file opens, the queen is not going to be under the x-ray of the rook. But this is the type of game that I call, WFF, who flinches first. Both of them are trying to make marginal improvements to their play, kind of tiptoeing around. And eventually someone is going to make a significant decision. White's going to try to play e4, knight e5, or black's going to try to play c5. And the question is, who has made more significant improvements to their position and is better prepared for the opening of the position? These types of maneuvering battles are always really interesting to me. And I think it's easy to kind of dismiss them as boring, but there's a lot of nuance that goes into trying to prepare for the opening of the position.
And this is already a tough question for white. Do I play a3 to prevent b4, or do I play a4 to stop c5? Or these are just little pawn moves on the queen side, but already it's a good question. It's like a3, I know I'm preventing b4, but I'm still allowing c5. a4, I'm allowing b4, but that opens my bishop up towards your queen side and makes c5 much more difficult to play. So right now, Nihal Sarin sitting here thinking, what do you think he's going to do, Danya?
I think he's going to play a4. I like that move. I think he's going to play knight e2. As I said, as I predicted, knight e2. Yep, very good.
And then I can come to f4 next, where it puts pressure on this bishop on e6. Not that that's real pressure, but you can say, I want the bishop pair, and I'll give you my knight.
And I think now Anton's going to play knight e4. Oh, yep. Well, I am the prophet after all. That was very impressive.
How brilliant.
Nerditsky predicting all of the moves only after they've been played.
You don't even need me anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm simply going to dictate the rest of the game, and then it will follow according to my dictation. So knight f4, I think, is going to be played. The time situation definitely concerning, but Nihal definitely relying on his bullet prowess. One thing that I have learned, Robert, and perhaps you can add your input here, these 5-minute games, it seems like so much time because we're used to watching 3-minute games and bullet games, but that time evaporates so quickly. And 95 is exactly as I predicted.
But you are right about the time situation, and especially because the last moments of the Junior Speeches Championship happen in bullet chess. So you have that fast-paced blunders happening, as we saw yesterday, the pre-move, the bishop d5 that had us hurting, falling out of our chairs. We have different paces, and you have to mentally adjust. And it can be very difficult for players who don't play a lot of 5-minute chess. That is not a time control that you don't play it over the board. You definitely don't play it online. So then you have a couple extra minutes. Do you keep the quick pace that you would in 3 minutes? Do you spend extra time? But as you just said, you get yourself into time trouble more quickly than you realize. And look at Nihal Sarin's clock. He's now down to 123. He's facing a knight d2, a fork on this square, hitting the queen on b1 and the rook on f1. So already there are some tactics in the position, and Anton has a minute and a half more than his opponent does, I'm starting to like white's position on the board. But then I'm looking at the clock and like, does he have enough time to really increase that edge?
Yeah, knight c2 is not that easy to defend against. If you move the queen back to c2, well, he's gone rook e1. I was going to say, you don't want to move the queen back into the c file because then black is definitely going to play c5. Now, white wants to play f3, and I think he wants to start expanding on that g file. g4, h4, g5, by the way, is a serious idea there because notice the battery b1, d3. That bishop can sneak into h7 potentially. And that can produce quite a lot of unpleasant tactics in the area of black's king. So Anton has to act very decisively on the queen side if he is to keep Nihal from prying his fingers away from kind of the center of the board.
Although I don't really see a nice looking way for black to prevent f3. And he plays queen to b6. Maybe that is a good way, especially in your opponent's time trouble. Not quite trouble yet, but it's getting there. Because when you play f3, you look at this diagonal. Wait, is my king in the wrong square? I can't play king h1. That drops the f2 pawn. So you just are creating some phantom threats more than anything. And he changes the dynamic of the game by taking on e6 finally. Not that the bishop could really go anywhere, but he does take that one off the board. And how do you follow up here? Because f3, knight to d6, that knight could even come into c4. And I think it's more difficult to play with white just because you have the advantage, as we see on the bar off to the left of the screen. But how do you actually improve it?
Yeah, I mean, you still don't want to commit with white. Even f3 is a positional commitment because if black plays c5, it can expose that weakness on a3. So with 30 seconds on the clock, it becomes harder and harder to get yourself to commit to something like that. I like the move rook c1 again. He continues to discourage c5. Anton has to continue finding these ways to put practical pressure on white. Okay, he goes rook e8, so he drops his rook back to a more natural square. Doubling on the c file is something to consider here. Rook c2, rook c1. And Nihal could even begin to consider b4 at some point to fix that pawn on c6. So he does play rook c2.
b4 would be just clamping down on the c5 square. Now I think the time is right to play c5 because you can take with the rook on c5 if the pawn captures, and that way there's going to be no pins. He does play c5.
He agrees.
And I think you have to take with the rook. I mean, other captures just look strange. Like taking with the
knight. I mean, I guess bishop c5 would create some knight c5. Okay.
So this
bishop f5 now looks a little unpleasant.
Right. And rook c1, rook e to c1 would have dropped the bishop, which would have attacked the rook on c1. So there were tactics that allowed black to do this, but you were right, Danya. Bishop f5 and just doubling here. This looks great for white.
Yeah, I definitely would have preferred. Now those knight f7 ideas begin to come into the play. Now this is where the clock is going to hurt Nihal because he needs time to calculate stuff. He goes bishop g3, the bishop coming out of the dead here, perhaps walking over to h4, turning the pressure dial up. How is Anton going to deal with this? His own clock beginning to tick down below a minute.
Yeah, and he gives himself the h2 square. No back rank checkmates. Not that really was any threat just yet. I'm looking, though, down at d4. Maybe
d4, exactly.
Take on c2 first and then play d4. But I don't think that Anton could just sit in this position. His structure is worse with the isolated d pawn. He does not have control of the c file, so he does take on c2, and I expect d4 to be played.
Yes, he has to create trouble. He goes knight c5 instead. Okay, that's a sensible move. The knight is heading to e4. Look at the clock. 5 seconds now for Nihal. He drops the knight back to f3, creating space for the bishop perhaps to move into e5. But that bishop on f5, notice that bishop. It doesn't have too many squares. g6 could be annoying.
Because
g6 could be annoying.
He plays it. He's forced to take it. And he's taking with the e pawn. Give me the d3 square.
And now the d3 square. Uh-oh.
And
bishop d6.
Oh, bishop d6 looks good just to get at this.
Knight g4, though. That threatens that f6. 2 seconds. He moves.
Okay, so is there some kind of rook e5, knight d3, or do I just go knight d3 first? Knight d3 first looks good.
This does look good in 1 second. I mean, this is not sustainable for Nihal.
It's certainly not. Rook e4 looks good. D2 is
d2, rook c8.
Oh, rook c8 because the b4 pawn will always be hanging here.
I guess queen b2. If Nihal picks off that pawn, and again, the bishop on h2, he has to bring it out.
G5.
That's a valuable tempo.
Push that
bishop. Take on b4. And rook c1.
Oh, that looks really good. You can't take it because rook c1. There's a pin here. You can't even protect the rook. So e4 played a desperate shot, but now it attacks the d2
Bishop
pawn.
d2, though. He should have played queen d4, I think.
So we have a rook endgame where black is better, but how much better?
Yeah, he's better because he has white's rook tied down, but look at Nihal activating his king.
This is very smart.
Anton bailed out. I'm not sure he should have.
And look at the king coming to e5. This is one of those positions where all of a sudden white can just go after these pawns here. And he has a5. There's no way to double up on the a5 pawn because you can only get the king there. The rook is stuck in a passive position.
Yeah, that's a good move. Rook c3, tying the king down. Look at the pawns marching forward.
a3, because rook b4, there's rook c2.
Plays b3. That would have been a great move.
But he still's going to go a3, and then rook b2.
Yeah, so bring the king in maybe.
Okay, he rushed it. He could have played king f6 first, as you were saying, but now rook h2, take on h4.
This is drawable, but with no time on the clock, this can easily be lost. Nihal pushing his f-pawn, but g5.
G5. Now you have two
look at the connected passers. Look at the
Come on, Anton, you got to move. Oh, he takes
it.
He didn't see it in the time trouble. King h6, there's king f6 always. Then rook f1 check. So
now he's got to make a move. He's got
he lost some time. Oh my gosh, he just shook his head in disbelief. Oh my gosh. Smirnov played a great game.
I was just about to say, if your internet is anything less than perfect and you leave yourself with 1 second to make each move, this is going to happen. That is a tough beginning for Anton.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine that was just the first game? Like how do you say that was only game one, let me calm myself down, and then play the rest of this match? I would already just be borderline tilting at this point.
I would be on my way to Best Buy, to be honest with you, to redeem my mouse insurance policy.
I mean, he just forgot about the clock. He was ahead on time the whole game. And then he just had me scream in our first game. What's going on?
I mean, the thing is, Nihal is really amazing in time pressure in the sense that he is good at essentially never losing on time. I mean, he won't always find the best moves, but he will find decent moves with 1 second on the clock. Remember, he had 2 seconds as far back as 20 moves before the end of the game, Robert, and he managed to create problems even then.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, this is going to be a great match. And
yes, it is.
It couldn't have gone off to a more exciting start. Unfortunately for Anton Smirnov, it resulted in a loss for him in a position he had no business losing. He was up a pawn in a rook endgame. He was trying to win that rook endgame. And Nihal, as you said, he put up great resistance to withstand the pressure on the board as well as on the clock. So now we have a position, Danya, move 16, knight g3 just played. Black has a light square bishop. White has a dark square bishop. And whose pawn structure is worse here? The pawn d6 doesn't look great.
Well, he's trying to correct that by playing d5. Visit to the orthodontist here. He's preparing that move by defending the pawn on c5. Anton he's really good at the exchange Ruy Lopez. That's what he essentially always plays against me when we play blitz. And he's really good at those structures. I mean, and that's what I mentioned when I said, despite these players' ages, they're both incredibly good positional players. But I actually think that there is no good way to stop d5, and Nihal has fully solved his opening problems here. After d5, the weaknesses are eradicated. I'm not really seeing even a shred of an advantage, but Anton at all costs trying to stop d5. I like that idea.
It's funny. I was about to highlight the move because you were talking about d5, and I was like, wait, that's a really annoying threat. So b4 says, play d5, I'll grab your c5 pawn. So Nihal, I mean, technically he can play d5 and take on e4. I don't think he should go for that. It's unnecessary tactics in a position where he seems very solid. I would play rook f to d8 probably, and I pose this question to you all the time. How do you choose which rook to go to d8? This e file, it's not going to amount to much. I think putting the rook on d8, the f rook, and then maybe this a rook to c8. He starts with rook a to c8. So
yep, that's exactly what he does, and I like the way you approach that question. You basically start by looking at the other rook. Will the other rook have employment or have a good square? If you put, one of the rooks on the square in question, and then you ask yourself that question, you try to determine, given the course of the game, will that other square be significant? I mean, it's not a perfect process, but it's better than just choosing a rook visually.
For sure. And here we see that the pawns from the b file have been traded, and now the b file is open for both sides, but rook a to b1 drops this pawn on a2 right away. So this rook on a1 stuck to the defensive pawn for the time being, at least, and maybe rook d2, rook to d1, but Donna, then your d5 move comes in very quickly. So d5 can be played right now.
He does brace for impact by moving his queen away from the ire of the knight that will land on d5, and perhaps he can meet that with some sort of knight f5 with ideas of rook takes d5, knight e7. I mean, that is all very artificial stuff, which can easily be prevented, but He's trying to sow the seeds of doubt, perhaps, in Nihal's mind. And Nihal doesn't rush, which I actually like. There is no big rush with d5. So he's making the sort of necessary improvements first, covering the e7 square, putting the rook on a file that will be opened up after d5.
Exactly. And white can play f3 to reinforce this pawn e4 that also frees up the knight from its defensive task on g3. And the dark squares would seemingly be weakened, but you have a dark square bishop. That doesn't tell the whole story, because this knight, if it does get to d5, will be able to go to f4 or something like that. But he starts with f3. I think that's a reasonable choice. And in the event of d5, maybe he'll actually drop the bishop to f2, because typically after bishop f2, you'd be a little concerned with like d4, but then you can even play c3. And already you're forcing this pawn off the square, and you're forcing the capture. And then the bishop on f2 is very happy staring at the queen side.
That is exactly what he does. And I quite like that approach. Again, very measured, very, he keeps the tension, and he poses black with a decision. And in Blitz, the more decisions you confront your opponent with, more time is taken off of, your opponent's clock. And decision fatigue, I think that's a thing in real life. When, you make several decisions, you become worse at them progressively. And in chess, it's the same thing. When you deal with several critical moments, you start becoming tired of constantly trying to choose between a couple of tempting options. Maybe double the rooks down the d file.
And that's why we talk about positions, even if objectively the evaluation bar says it's level, it's harder to play for one side. And thus we think that side is often worse, because you're spending 15 seconds every single move just to stay with that equality, whereas your opponent has like 6 different moves, all of which are equally good. So he takes on d5 now. The bishop is safe and sound on f2. And if knight takes d5, I was mentioning how it wasn't just the e3 square, but the f4 square that this knight can hop to. And look at how quickly he played f5, giving up the c5 pawn.
Knight f4, I guess, is what he's cooked up here. And chances surrounding white's king. Never play f3, one wise man said. And after knight f4, I feel like, okay, rook e2, same kind of concept. He's delaying knight f4. Queen g6 is another thing to consider. Another move that might be thrown into the mix, especially in combination with knight f4. But what about queen d3?
Rook takes f2 is a big threat, right?
So it is. Yeah, queen d3, rook f2, that is not good. So Anton has to drop his knight back, and he does.
And now how do you take on c2? If you take with the queen, there's rook a to c1 and bye-bye to your rook on c8. So don't do that. So you can take with the rook on c2, but that encourages some trades.
Knight e5, I guess.
Sometimes it's good to leave that pawn there, because if you take the pawn, it opens up some of white's counterplay. Whereas if you sit your knight on c3, for example, white's pieces have trouble really moving. So I actually would not take the pawn right now. I would leave it there. I'm not sure if knight c3 is best, but some kind of move that maybe keeps white tied down to the defense rather than allowing his pieces to flow freely.
Yeah, it's not easy to find one. Queen f6 came to my mind just as a way of taking this thing out of knight e5 and perhaps preparing to double rooks on the second rank. Now, that doesn't quite have the, that move doesn't look like some deadly blow. But again, Nihal has to make a decision fairly quickly, and I certainly also would not take the pawn on c2. I would try to keep the tension, and he does play queen f6.
Look at you. You're the Nihal whisperer. Queen f6 is a great move.
Predicted every single move in the match.
I just really like that move, because the pawn could have been captured on c2 a couple different ways. We're saying that pawn's not going anywhere. I can take it. I can also park my rook on c3 or my knight on c3. So we still are leaving options open for black. The one good thing for Anton, he's ahead on the clock. Everything else with the position, well, he has an extra pawn that, again, not going to last. But everything else doesn't feel particularly good for him. So he's spending his time right now. And I do think that he has to just get defensive with rook a to c1, which maybe if he gets another free move, can play c4.
Yeah, like a boxer kind of putting his hands up. He's got to do it, and he does. And you're the Anton whisperer.
I don't know about all that, but it just felt like the natural move. You do not want to allow rook take c2 with full strength of the double rooks on the 7th rank.
Right. Now the sound is somewhat muffled, but black definitely in the driver's seat. He's calling the shots now. More piece activity. What Anton needs to focus on is how do you neutralize this tremendous coordination and piece activity that Nihal has acquired. That queen on f6 is sort of overseeing everything. It's covering very important squares on d4 and e5. It's cutting off the lifeline, the sort of connection between the queen side and king side, and it's making it very hard for white to move. It's like he's stuck in molasses, and Anton trying to trade some pieces, but rook takes f2 and queen h4 is something to consider.
That looks nice, but rook
Rook
f2,
F2,
there might
knight
be some
D5
knight
maybe.
d5. Exactly.
Queen B2
Whoa,
then is one option.
whoa. There's a back rank checkmate, right? So this king is, if I go rook d2, and but you don't have to take. So maybe I'm just getting cheeky.
No, that's a beautiful move though. And then if you move the rook, okay, forget it. He just takes.
But I mean, I saw the evaluation bar jump, so I'm looking at your, rook takes f2. We said knight takes d5. So here, let's bring up an analysis board for that moment, because this is how having the evaluation bar off to the side helps. I don't know for certain that rook d2 is good, but I'm like, why is it -3? Well, I'm looking for tactics. You're forcing me to look for tactics, and if rook d2, you can't take it because there's checkmate on the back rank.
I think that's it.
Everything here, and if you'd moved your rook away, say to e1, then after
now
rook
you
e1,
take on f2 maybe.
Rook takes
or
f2.
No.
But then there's knight d5 still.
Yeah.
So what is it? I don't know. I found the first move. I don't know what happens after. Maybe just knight f4 and like a check.
Yeah, honestly, it usually is kind of like that. Just huge attack, unstoppable threats.
So I actually don't know what it was, but instead we saw the trades, and
okay.
King came to h7.
And now Anton has gained some activity in return for the pawn. The obstacle are bishops. In endgame, they might be a harbinger of a draw. But in a middle game with queens, they can actually add to the spice level of the position because they operate uncontested, so they can cooperate with a rook or a queen to pose huge threats that are very hard to defend against. And look at Nihal's clock, 10 seconds. He does trade rooks, though.
But look at that bar just drop, because that means that the king on h7 not fully safe, as you were just mentioning. With queens on the board, if I can line up my bishop on d4, you're going to get under attack first. White's pawn structure is perfectly situated. Queen takes a5. This is just going to be a draw.
And Anton declines a draw. I would make some moves here with white. I would put the bishop on d4 and just make some moves. Queen f8.
Yeah, bishop e5, queen f8.
Show black who is boss here, even just psychologically. And I read this somewhere. I didn't fully appreciate it before. Sometimes by putting this kind of pressure, you're able to create a sort of impact on your opponent. You're able to tire him out a little bit.
True. It's very true. And h5 is the idea for black, but then you go g5, and then these pawns are just pushing.
But okay, now f5, okay.
Hey, you're right. This is actually not as easy for black.
You know what idea exists is g5, and then if you can get your queen access to h2.
Right.
King f2 here and g5.
Nice.
He does it immediately. King g4. Oh my goodness.
Oh, the bishop is h7. That's important.
Oh, queen f6 draws.
So check, just back, wait. Okay, queen c7.
f6 now.
f6 is looking scary.
But no, takes in king g8.
This doesn't look comfortable.
Bishop e5 maybe.
Okay, so king g8 and queen f7.
Draw.
Yeah, I guess you always have like queen f8, queen f7 here. It just looks scary, right?
It does, but there's no queen g6 though.
Yeah, not queen e4 exactly.
Yeah, good move by Nihal. Draw.
What a game. What a game.
That was a very high quality game with a lot of turnarounds, and both players really putting themselves out there. There was a positional stage and then a tactical stage. So definitely a fighting draw indeed. And speaking of fighting and probably not draws, we have something that some of you might remember from the previous Anton Smirnov match. It's a photograph, Robert.
It is. So we want people to guess the age of Anton Smirnov in this photo. Some of you already know it, so please don't ruin it for everybody else. But you can guess Anton Smirnov's age in this photo.
15.
What a cute-looking kid who was just super good at chess, even though I guess his age belies his strength in that photo.
Baby-faced assassin. And Anton, very soft-spoken, very mature, but he is a killer on the chessboard.
Certainly is, and he has the black pieces in this game. And look at the control from these. Knight on e4 says, "Give me d6, give me c5." This move c5 is what black always wants to play in such a position, but you're not getting that thanks to this noble steed in the center of the board. So I actually really like Nihal's position. The one thing that I could see going south for him, Danya, is this pawn on d4. So if this knight moves out the way, then that pawn on d4 is starting to feel a bit vulnerable.
Why isn't it going north for him? Like, why is it? I always confuse these expressions. Going south. Is going north mean like it goes well, and going south means it goes badly?
Yeah, up and down usually. So
interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah. In any case, I know that's a very relevant point of discussion here. That pawn on d4, I agree. So the move queen g4 here was what would be ideal, but it doesn't work because if queen takes d4 and knight f6 check, discovering the attack against the queen does not work. Black takes on f6 with the knight. and opens up the defense of the queen on d4. So
Exactly.
how is Nihal going to solve, as you say, that problem of the d4 pawn? Maybe you play knight c2. I know that looks terribly awkward, but the more I look at this position, Robert, I'm beginning to think that's a pretty serious problem that's holding him back quite a bit.
And he plays a3 because he's saying, I'm not so worried like you guys are. But knight c2 just feels too passive. I can't get behind that move, even though I understand the intentions of it. And especially now, if you play knight c2, I'm guessing c5 will just be played immediately.
Knight d6 has to be considered in some of these positions, and then trading on d5 somehow. Although right now it probably doesn't work.
Yeah, it just probably gives away a pawn. But I see your point that with the rook on c8, there could be a hanging piece at the end of some of these variations.
Well, yeah, knight f5, knight g7 is an idea. Actually, that might be a serious idea.
Sorry, knight d6, you said?
Yeah, bishop d6.
Yeah.
And then e d6.
Yeah.
So rook d6.
Uh-huh.
Bishop d5, ed.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Knight f5, rook f6, knight g7, and queen g4
so
picks off the hanging rook.
I'd have to play rook e6 because rook f6, you have your
queen g4 though, and g6, knight e7.
Man, you're just all over the place with your tactics today. that's just
loose pieces drop off. Of course, that doesn't work because black can handle that better. After e takes d6, he can take the knight on e3, I think. But at least it deserves to be calculated.
That was a boss line, and I can show it again really quickly just to show you whatever. Knight d6 takes, pawn takes. I'm guessing taking back on d6 is not smart.
Yeah, knight e3 is the reason this doesn't work.
And look at the bar; it's like minus 1.3.
Bar is like Daniel. No.
But let's just show that one more time. Knight f5, hitting g7, hitting d6, throwing knight e7. So rook f6, we talked about knight g7, and then this.
Well, knight e7 there actually is even stronger.
I'm focused on the harder tactic, the easier tactic I missed. Obviously, check. So rook e6, and then queen g4 threatens mate. G6 to stop it. Knight e7 check. Bam, bam. Takes and give me your rook, and white is up in exchange for a pawn.
Thank you for taking the time to show that, Robert.
It was a lot. It was a lot to go through. So knight c5. Only one move has been played, so it's not like we really missed too much here. But this knight on c5.
What do you mean? I mean, 30 moves have been played. Let's catch up to the action here. So move 40. Yeah. So he's planted the knight on that stronghold.
Yes. And it's annoying because do I really want to take you? You may take with the pawn, and the bishop on e8 looks terrible. However, with the rook on d8 staring at the queen on d1, is there some kind of like knight e3 in the mix at some point?
There is even now knight e3, bishop c5, rook c5, queen takes c5. Now, the problem at the end of that is that white is going to have that massive square on d6 with the rook. So that's out of the question, at least.
I'm gonna show that just so everyone gets a clear picture. You said queen c5 takes, rook takes. Like, oh, it's an ugly pawn structure for white, but thank you for the only open file. And your bishop on e8 looks terrible as well.
And that juicy square on d6 on top of it. I mean, that's not exactly what the doctor ordered. And Anton does take on c5 first. My guess is he's going to try to keep that knight on d. Oh, no, that doesn't work either. I was thinking of a way. But what do you do here?
You just like freak me out. You're like, whoa. And I was like, I don't see anything. But
well, I thought about queen takes c5 and then knight takes c3. And it just occurred to me, white's going to just take the knight. And then we're going to get the same position.
That's really funny because if you move the queen, then I get two rooks and I'm happy. But you'll just do the same thing. We take on e3. And it's funny how our brains work. Sometimes we don't realize it's just a simple transposition. But at the start,
funny our brains don't work.
You played knight e7.
It's funny how my brain doesn't work.
Your brain works just fine down here.
b4.
So the reason why I don't like knight e7 is, well, where's that knight going? And you haven't done anything about this configuration of pawn on d4, rook on c5. White needs to double rooks in the c file, but you can't do that very easily. As soon as you play queen d2 or queen d3, then I take on c5 because your queen will be left undefended on one of these two squares. So doubling the rooks is not actually that easy. You'd have to play b4 first, but then black plays a5 and swings that rook over to a8 and at least has some counterplay.
Yeah, but I would accept that. I would play b4. Another idea to consider, table f4, f5, very brute force strategy, but it could be very strong. But I would definitely start with b4 because that rook on c5, you cannot have that in the back of your head all the time. And that's, yeah.
What about queen g4 as well? That way you can double and you still protect your pawn on d4.
Really like that move. And that covers everything at once. I love that move, queen g4. And the queen is essentially unassailable in that square.
Right. You'd have to do something very drastic in order to kick it, like h5. That's a super risky move, no matter when you play it. And Daniel, one thing I'm annoyed about from Black's perspective. I can't kick this rook from c5. So if I could reroute my knight to kick the rook, I'd be happier. So maybe knight c7 instead of knight e7 was a better choice, just so I could have played knight a6 and kicked the rook.
Right, but sorry to change the subject, but is Nihal allowing queen takes c5? There was something there. I mean, queen takes c5 there that Black's knight would have still had access to the d5 square. So I guess that would have been something to consider for Anton.
Oh,
but bishop takes h7 check probably he intended.
But what a difference a move makes. I'm just going to show that quickly. So queen takes, pawn takes, rook d1, and then knight d5 at the end. You're saying I've closed down the d file, and even though white's position is surely better, how are you actually going to make progress? There's no easy way to infiltrate here. I would take knight d5 with the bishop and play again with a knight against the bishop because in a locked position, the knight is superior, though Anton would have had chances to hold in such a situation.
Now the clock. Nihal down to 30 seconds to Anton's 2.5 minutes. He's trying to find inroads. Queen h5 meets with f5. Do not do that. That bishop on e8 is a tiger. Yeah, it's a cage tiger, but it can jump out of its cage. And here we see, as you predicted, Robert, b4, a5, trying to chip through, crack through, create some counterplay.
And this rook on c7 is so good because you can go to d7 to hit d4, but also go to a7 and then double on the a file and make use of that. So queen to g4 played, but where is the attack supposed to come from for white? Is there some kind of queen h4? Probably to keep an eye out on it, but rook d4 fails, the bishop h7 check, discovery, getting the rook back on d4. So for now, d4 is protected, but how much longer will it be safe and sound?
Not that long, but rook fc1, that idea, nobody canceled the idea of doubling on the c file. As you call it, an h4, h5, f4, f5, all of these ideas in the mix. But I agree with you. Nihal has to keep an eye on that d4 pawn. It's very easy to blunder, right? You just assume it's defended because the bishop takes h7, but you have this sort of situational blindness. You don't realize that the situation often can change imperceptibly. So Anton has to try to whip up some tricks, I think, related to that pawn d4. Maybe rook a4 here. I don't know. But then he leaves his knight undefended, and there's bishop h7, queen h4.
That's right. So I mentioned queen h4 earlier, but rook a4, there's ideas of queen h4 hitting this knight on e7. So h6 played. Good move. Very good move by Anton. Yes. Queen f4.
Knight g4 maybe is the idea. And he's trying to break through by sacking on h6 or f6.
Ooh, that's kind of nasty. How rook a4? Can I just start taking your pawns? I see your sacrifice and I say, I don't believe it.
No, I get what you're saying, especially in the context of Nihal's time. With 10 seconds, okay. Knight g6 play. So he allows the trade.
Yeah, not a huge fan of this, but I understand it.
d7, that c6 pawn is constantly hanging in those lines. That's what really hurts him. Rook a4 anyway, maybe.
Yeah, I'm looking at rook a4 just to hit the b4 pawn, but you can even play rook to b1 there. It's a bit passive. It just holds everything together for the time being.
Queen b7. I mean, Anton's position remains very passive, but it also remains relatively solid. It's going to be a while before Nihal actually breaks through, even if Anton does nothing.
And he can go queen d7 to put pressure
and
on
he
d3,
does
it.
And Nihal, his resources are stretched thin here.
You don't want to go backwards, and knight c2 was played. So how does black improve? Because I want to play g5, bishop
g5 at some point.
Right.
Exactly.
So here he goes, g5.
Yep.
g5, right now you invited it.
And queen takes g5. The rook on c1 is going to be hanging as well.
Exactly.
The game is turning around.
Is scary. And if the knight moves
2 seconds for Nihal.
No, this is a black game.
Rook b4, and now this pawn falls.
And then once that one falls, d4 is next.
Yep. Okay. Bishop g6 now.
Well, I don't want to drop c6
though.
Yeah. So queen e7 threatens queen takes c5. He goes rook to b2, also a good move.
Bishop g6 now works because queen c6, there's queen takes e3.
Oy, and there's rook f8 coming. Yeah, you're walking into everything.
Queen f4. Queen f4, rook f8. Rook f8, and now rook f2. Wow.
Exactly.
Incredible.
We both were on that just instantly. Like, rook
instantly,
f8.
Yeah. Queen h5 is tempting, but far from as effective as rook f8. Nihal, this is where the time comes in. He does it. Surgical precision from Anton.
And you can even take on g5 right away because rook f1 is always met by bishop d3. And that makes it harder for white to play because bishop e4 check is in the air. So you can't even take on c6.
Fantastic idea, and Anton does it.
Bishop d3. No, this is bad. It's worse than bad.
This is losing, but 13 seconds. He's got to keep his speed.
Oh, gosh. Rook h2, rook h1. Mate. Game over.
Yep. Wow. Robert, that was an incredible defensive performance by Anton.
Yeah, that was just honestly a great game and a great bounce back for him after game one.
Indeed.
And I would say that from the 3 games we've seen thus far, 1.5 feels very fair. And I typically do not like using words like deserved or fair.
Fair,
but
yeah.
It does feel like we've had a pretty balanced matchup where sometimes Nihal's had a better position, sometimes Anton's had a better position, and they've been now trading off points, and it's even.
Definitely. And Anton he's very level-headed. He's hard to tilt. And I could have totally seen someone just fall off the edge after that time loss. But Anton stabilized the ship. He drew a game with white and then didn't panic when he got a very tough position with black. He sort of stood his ground. And Nihal taking too long in that critical moment. I think there were a couple of moments Nihal was trying to kind of find the best way forward. And he ended up slipping below 30 seconds. And that's just always difficult when the position opens up. Now, this line, Bishop F7, yeah, that is a move.
Yes, you get the piece back on d4, but bishop b7. So what black has done is given up a pawn, but says, I have the bishop pair. We actually should analyze this a little bit, just for everybody to understand better what's happening. So if we could pull up the analysis board just to show everybody, the issue for white is that if you take on d4 as you normally would and just trade, here comes c5, hitting your queen, and c4 traps the bishop on b3. So that's a big problem. And if you take on e5, black can just take on b3 and say, I have the bishop pair, and without any problem. So bishop f7, rook f7, knight e5, you can move your knight back somewhere like knight e6, but the difference between typical positions is that white has a very quick pawn storm. And that's
and even e5 immediately followed by queen f3, hitting that rook on a8.
Yeah, that's just brutal. So, even in these knight c6 variations, still something similar happens where I have just a very quick initiative with e5, and I'll have to check. Your knight has to go back somewhere. It's very ugly for black. So that's why we got to the point where we did. Sorry to belabor that point. And we see the bishop on b7, unopposed on the light squares. Now there's a direct target on d5. And if this knight moves out the way, watch out for queen to h4, because there's just attacking potential with both of these bishops, and kind of everything is under attack here.
Robert, can you draw a diagonal from d7 to h3 there? Because I had an OCD moment right there.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I left one out.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. That's it. I think everybody wanted to see that. Okay, so he has dropped his knight back.
No, I mean, this is just
bad. Nice move.
It's just bad for white. I'm trying to open up that bishop on b7, and rook f5 wins the pawn on d5 very directly.
Yeah, that is. I mean, the floodgates open. Does white even have anything he can do after rook f5? Okay, maybe c4, bc, queen c2. Now that's all crap. It's all a bunch of malarkey.
And you're also inviting me to sacrifice the rook on f3, because if that queen moves away from d1 and I can take on f3 and you take with your pawn, I'll be pretty happy about that.
Right. No, Nihal, I think, is trying to figure out whether he's missing anything. That's often something that happens in games. You might wonder, why isn't he making, this move? Why is he taking so long? Well, he knows that Anton is a very tricky player. He usually has something up his sleeve. So even when Anton blunders, Nihal has to take a lot of time to ensure that he himself is not in fact falling into some sort of a trap.
Yeah, I am wondering what other moves he's considering here. Queen f6 would be a move that is high on my list. Rook f5, of course, the first move that I was saying. I'm just going after the d5 pawn. What else, though? So those two moves. Give me another, Diane.
Well, no, I think queen f6 is the only other Canada move that even occurs to me. I mean, nothing like rook. Yeah, he does play queen f6. So he's going for the whole shebang here. I suppose this is just terrible for white too. I mean, white cannot hold anything together here. He's underdeveloped. If he moves his bishop out, he does drop b2. Not that black will take it. Maybe black will just play queen f7. I mean, I was going to say, Robert, these positions are just so hard to even survive in for more than like a couple moves.
Yeah, I would maybe go for
Why does the eval bar like white's position? I mean, this is one of those situations where I would bet a good deal of money on black's position, even though a computer might hold this together.
Yeah, and c4 was played as I was going for that as like an only option. You'd mentioned that idea earlier, and even though I lose a pawn, I'm just saying, well, I have some activity. My rook gets to b1. I'm pestering your bishop on b7. Your queen has really gone pretty far to take on c3. It's out of the play, and then my bishop come to b2 and a counter. So I do think that white has much better prospects here than in the rook f5 line, but still, I also have this feeling that black should not be worse here.
No, and but I don't like Queen F6 at all. I think Rook F5, he overthought it. Now he's realizing it and he's taking a lot more time. I admit, now that you illustrated this, I can see that White actually has a lot of counter chances. So I stand corrected, especially with that long diagonal for his bishop. Still, I think this all hinges on White being very precise in the next couple of moves. So what to do here? Because if that pawn on d5 falls, Black's going to have connected passers on the D and C files. So yeah, right. So that would not be pleasant, especially in an endgame.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out an idea for White here because bishop b2, just queen c4, hitting a2, hitting d5, and I'm not sure that White has an easy follow-up. So I like the bishop on b2. How are you going to put a second attacker on the g7 square?
Maybe bishop e5 after queen c4.
Okay, that's actually a really nice looking move. Trying to trade off the dark square bishops and hop your knight right into the e5 square. That's far more annoying than I anticipated. So queen c4, bishop e5. Good looking
Well,
move.
you can take on e5 and then on d5. And because of the threat of checkmate on g2, this essentially forces the queen trade. After which there isn't going to be a fork on d7. White can still take. So I think we might see that happen, but probably Anton can do better than that. I think that's just one of the options. You can also play knight e5, actually orienting himself toward a fork on d7. Not sure that works, though.
Yeah, knight e5 is one of those moves where, like, I didn't want to trade things, so let me just play for the more ambitious line. He plays bishop e5, and can you actually take with the rook on e5, potentially, after bishop takes? Is that
because of the check on d5, Black cannot use the back rank. Interesting. Okay, I guess we're about to find out.
And I'm looking at the bar, but it just did something. Wait, it says zeros now. So I don't know what it was potentially seeing. It must have missed some kind of variation for Black that holds. And maybe it's that after like these knight d7, there's
it's a real Barty booper.
Yeah, it went up, and I was like, what's happening? What are we missing? But I think that everything you said is going to happen here with queen d5. It's throwing a checkmate on g2, so you have to trade, and then there's no fork because the rooks are staring each other down on the b file.
But I think that was ensuing endgame. Black has the passer on c5, so after everything is captured, he can put his rook on b5 and defend that pawn. And I'm not seeing, in that case, exactly how White coordinates his pieces and stops the passer. So I think that Anton has perhaps seen further than I have. Okay, so rook d1, that's the key. He's not taking on b8. He's preserving the activity of his pieces, and he might force a rook endgame after bishop e6, knight takes d7, when his rook on the 7th, I think, basically guarantees him activity that compensates for Black's passed pawn. And I think it's going to be a draw.
And what could Neil be thinking about here? Is he really thinking about taking on a2 and giving an exchange for the passed pawns? I would never do that.
Never say never.
Knight and bishop c6, right? These are the two moves that don't lose you material.
Right.
So yes. I'm just a little confused.
I am confused as well. I think he likes getting into time pressure.
Or he was trying to figure out the follow-up, but now he's spending time again. So unclear.
Move first, think later.
Rook b2. Just get in the game here.
But then rook b2, I guess he was worried about f3.
Yeah, and then the White's rooks are actually going to put pressure first.
This is actually not easy. Rook fe8 or rook fda. He's got to trade rooks.
So rook a7.
Rook a8. Just pursue the rook wherever it goes in the 7th. I think that's going to be the end of the game. It's just repetition like that.
And the reason why that this is such a hold for Black is there's no escape score for the White king. Because if I played rook a7 and Danya plays rook a8 and I trade here, on other variations, I could get my rook active very quickly, but there's always the threat of a back rank checkmate that gives Black activity in return.
This is like in foosball when you're going from side to side and the opponent is pursuing you, from one side to the other side, and there's no way to score the goal. All attempts are blocked.
Yeah, and this looks like they're just going to agree on a repetition, I would imagine, and we still have 44 minutes left of this 5-minute portion. So about half the time, reminder to everybody that there are 90 minutes of the 5-minute plus 1 second increment time control, an hour of 3 plus 1, and then 30 minutes of the bullet of 1 plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
So plenty of time left in this match. It is even right now, 1.5, 1.5. Make that 2-2. And Danya, that game there, Nihal missed rook f5. So what are you seeing in his play today? He's been quite solid, but I feel like he's been uncertain as well.
Yes, I was completely agree. I think you're on the money. I think he's And again, disclaimer, this is very easy for me to say. Obviously, I'm not implying he's playing badly. He's actually playing very well. But it's the critical moments. It's the moments when he has a choice. It's the moments when he's trying to expand and extend his advantage. He's taking a little bit too long, and I think he's giving maybe Anton a tiny bit too much credit. He's trying to find a crushing blow immediately rather than sort of just playing the simple move and preserving a lot of time on his clock. And what's happening as a result is that he's entering these technical phases with a minute or less on his clock. And you know, even if you're winning against someone like Anton, who's so good at posing practical difficulties, Robert, it's very hard to win any position when you've got virtually no time on your clock.
That's exactly the case. And as
it looks like we're offline.
Aha.
We might be.
Yeah, I see lots of Fs there. I never know if it's just... Oh.
It's back. I think it's back. It is back.
All right, well, it seems like it's a Twitch error here, but, I mean, it looks fine on our end. Sorry about that if anybody lost connection with us, but we have a position where I'm looking at the cameras down here. Nihal Sarin's not even at his computer. He must have gone to the bathroom, and we've talked about how he's been the one in time trouble. He cannot afford to spend a minute plus here for no other reason than
when you gotta go, you gotta go. And I got some stories about this, but I won't tell them on this official broadcast. But yeah, I mean, he is taking a long time too, 3.5 minutes, and they haven't even exited the opening phase. That is a serious gambit right there.
And Nihal's back. We just saw him sit down. He makes his move queen to c2. You know, that's although I have to say that if you're going to go to the bathroom at any moment, you just need to go. That was a good time to do it. You move 10. There are no complications. Like, you just go and come back, and now you have to figure out the rest of the game as you would in any other circumstances. So,
well, some of the hardest decisions when you're playing over the board, I will hint at some of these stories without actually telling them, is when you're in acute time pressure, but I mean, you just really, you drink a lot of water during the game. You know, you really need to you need to pee but you have 1 minute. So you're trying to just weigh the pros and cons. Are you going to make it, and are you going to make it back? And especially sometimes when you're playing an unfamiliar tournament, you don't know where the bathroom even is. So you're trying to survive until the time control. That creates a whole constellation of problems. Anyways, I spent way too long talking about Nihal's trip to the bathroom. They're still in kind of theoretical territory, and we have another one of those positions that occurred in game one.
We do. And it is a position that both players now feeling a little bit more familiar with. For the second straight time, Smirnov brings his bishop to f8. Is this the exact same position we saw, or was the queen already on b1 for Nihal at this point?
Well, I think he moved it to b1 right around this moment.
And I like it better on c2 because you can also go to e2.
Yes. That's a very good point, and there's just no burning urgency. Even if black plays c5 and the queen is perfectly safe where it is, he goes knight d5. So Anton can take and then shift the other knight to d7, right. But that takes the weight off the d5 pawn, and so c5 is going to be a little bit less feasible. But again, it's not like black has to play c5 or his position is in imminent danger of collapse. It's not. Yeah,
you're saying all very fair points here, that c5 is the move that black wants to play, but sometimes you rush it and you create new problems for yourself. You don't like the look of this backward pawn c6, but you won't like the look of an isolated pawn on d5 either. So the knight came back to e2. We saw this journey already. The knight coming to f4 to win this bishop on e6, or trade off the knight for the bishop, and then try to get to the f5 square, for instance. So black can play c5 right now, and that looks to me to be a good move, but then you have to consider the repercussions of the d5 square, and he plays c5.
He does. And yeah, I was going to say, I think this is the lesser evil. Wow. Okay. So Nihal is not against parting ways with his bishop, which Anton gladly accepts, but white is for sure better here. Look at that pawn on d5, the blockading square on d4. Very often
it's rook c4 though.
Yeah, me too. It's putting the rook on a stronghold. b3 introduces, well, right now it just blunders a pawn, but it will always introduce weaknesses on the queen side. It's hard to deal with that pesky rook, and Anton can then double on the c file.
Yes, and I would not advise anyone to think about taking on c4 because that honestly you could take with either pawn. The b pawn puts pressure on b2, and then the d pawn says, "Hey, I've gotten rid of my isolated pawn, and my bishop on e6 feels much better about the game." So the bishop on e6 is the problem piece in addition to the pawn d5. They're tethered together, honestly. And queen d2 played, and what's the point of that? Because you can play knight d4, you can play knight f4. Instead, he chooses bishop e5. So, Danya, where is this bishop going? Just a d4, sitting on a blockading square?
Yeah, either d4 or c3, maybe shutting down that c file entirely. Now, that is not a very reliable way to shut it down because a5, b4 is always something you have to kind of bear in mind. But now Anton has an important decision to make. How does he turn the pressure, that knob, that dial up? Maybe queen e7, queen g5. Yeah, he does queen e7.
Ooh, nice idea, because the queen on b7 actually looked pretty decently placed, protecting d5, threatening b4 at some moment, or helping b4, not threatening. It's not really a big threat. But now queen g5, as you're pointing out, and bishop takes h3 right away because the bishop was hanging. So the bishop drops to c3, and now the queen comes to g5. Danya, that was
king.
Yeah, I really like that rerouting of the queen from b7, where it was fine, but not doing much in terms of activity, and then getting over to g5, where immediately there's a threat of h3. And this rook can swing over to h4 if you're not careful either.
I would consider f4 with white. I know that seems very drastic and anti-positional. Ooh. Now rook h4, bishop f6 maybe is the idea. Oh, no, the bishop... See, the problem is the rook on c8 is defended, so there's never any kind of discoveries against it.
But I saw
everything
your
is
plan.
Protected.
That makes sense. Like if this rook somehow is out the way, it does look like you have a discovery, but not quite.
Continues, but he plays b. What about rook h4 now? What is his idea? Something Anton didn't like about it. I guess he just wants to keep the pressure on the c file. Now bishop b2 though.
How about bishop b4?
Okay.
Can I try to trade off the dark square bishops? He plays it.
Yep, that's exactly what he does.
I'm just making the claim my knight will definitely be better than your bishop on e6.
Bishop h2.
Not actually a horrible move.
Yeah. Well, whoa, f4?
f4,
queen f6. Oh my goodness. Anton is so tricky. He doesn't miss stuff like that.
It's funny because in a bullet game, I think somebody would play f4 and then regret it immediately. Because when queen f6 happens, you're like, oh gosh, I've just created all these weaknesses.
I mean, it's not the end of the world, honestly. You could still do it, but I agree.
Right.
Black doesn't have a knight.
Exactly. If you had a knight, that would go into e4.
Oh, God. That would have been a nightmare. Well, literally.
Yeah, well.
That was hilarious.
Oh, Danya. So let's see. If not for f4, which we're kind of... Maybe it's fine. I don't love it.
What else do you do?
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling to figure out. Because my king is in a weird spot as well on f1. I can't go to g1, I hang h3. I can't go to e1 because I hang g2. So my king is stuck where it is anyway.
You know who else is struggling to figure it out? Nihal. He's got 23 seconds again. And again, a 2-minute deficit. As amazing of a bullet player as he is, this is just too big of a deficit, in my opinion. I mean, at this position, if he figures out the immediate problems, I think he can stabilize the ship. But rook takes c1, queen takes c1, d4 comes to mind as one option. Anton can just shift the rook to d7 if he wants to preserve more chances, although that is a bit of a riskier approach. We'll see.
So d4, is f4 working? Though. There's still queen f6. Okay, so somehow this queen, but then there's queen c5. It's getting a little complicated.
It is, and 20 seconds is not enough to handle these complications.
So queen f5 seems safer than queen f6 to me, but maybe I'm wrong here. But
I actually agree. And again, we might get an opposite colored bishop position where the queens essentially mean that black does have some chances to win.
Oh, and this b3 pawn's hanging.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Also, I can play queen b1 check if you try to go queen c5. I think that black's just going to take this one. Oh.
Yeah, quite. I mean, I think white's got good chances to draw still. Because any queen trade can, even down a pawn, even down 2 pawns, potentially can raise the drawing chances for white. What does black take now? He probably d4. Nihal wants queen e3. He wants to use that queen trade as a weapon. And Anton actually takes the other pawn, preserving the tension.
And giving himself pass pawn opportunities on the queen side. If I play a5, you take me on a5, I take on a3. And it's sort of a principle of 2 weaknesses. You know that black is going to put the bishop on d5 at some point and try to attack g2. So if I can create a pass pawn on the other side of the board, now I'm tying you down to the defense of the g2 square and also the pass pawn. So it's not so easy for white to defend this position.
No, and well, yeah, it's not easy for either side here. And both of them are tremendous endgame players. Queen c1 check, by the way, is something to consider. Queen c1, queen f1, and white is barely defending that. Okay, but now Nihal plays queen d2. That queen on d2, it looks passive, but guess what? It defends f4 and d4, and it stops black from playing a5. So black will have to try to find a way to make some inroads despite that queen.
And honestly, Anton can just play this game forever. Queen e7, queen
Yeah,
f4.
and he will.
Then play f6, king h7, g5.
Yep.
We saw how he tried to win that first game.
Slowly, okay, very slowly. Progress, slowly.
Actually, can you play king h7, king g6, king f5? Is that also possible?
Have you turned into Nigel Short against Jan Simon?
Exactly. Too much, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you need to figure out how exactly you're going to arrange your pawns. I like f5 and g5, actually. Goes f6 first. Do not rush. That's the principle.
Wait, d4?
Queen d4. Bishop f8. Nice. F5, though. Yeah, I think he's just given it. But queen d4, f5. Bishop f7, bishop f8. That could get dangerous for black.
Oh, wait, did he just miss bishop f8? Because queen c2 doesn't make much sense.
But now g5. I mean, now he has g5.
He does indeed, and then f takes.
And then the c7 square is covered, so white doesn't have that nasty...
f5. Oh, didn't white just have f5 and queen c7? That's where I was.
He did. And that could have been... Was that winning for white, Robert?
I don't think it was winning, but it definitely is.
He's got to move! Oh, my goodness. Oh,
wait.
b4. Oh, look at the pawns.
Here comes the pawn. It's exactly what we're talking about.
It is. You called it. And
here comes
b3. Scrambling, but b3, it's not enough.
Queen d4 check even, or just b2 and just win the piece.
It's over.
It's over.
Amazing. What a performance. Anton's endgame play is phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And he wins one with black. Incredible stuff.
Let's bring up the analysis board really quickly to remind people, or just to show them what just happened there, because it seemed like it should have been holding for white, and g6 was played. And after a5, trying to get the passed pawn, white, I think, had to play the move f5. And the point is that I am getting my queen into c7 with check, so I'm trying to turn the tables. So if queen f5, queen c7 check, the king can just drop back to g8, and it looks like there should be, at the very least, a bunch of checks against this king, depending on where it goes. So, yeah, it looks like king h7, king to g8 back and forth would have been a draw.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard to spot those moments with almost no time on the clock, but definitely some fortune required to win those positions. But let's be clear, Anton did a tremendous job squeezing the most out of that position. And, the time situation in virtually every game is working in his favor. And I think Nihal might be regretting that bathroom trip. Yes. Here they have a Rogozin.
Yeah, and we getting word that the bathroom gambit was declined. So
the bathroom gambit declined.
Oh, so we have the Rogozin, as you just said. The knight is on c6. So that's the odd part of a Rogozin, is the knight is in front of the pawn. And as we've seen Anton do with the black side, playing c5 is something you want to do to gain space for your pieces. And so the knight at c6 isn't bad, but you want to put pressure in the center with the pawn first and then the knight behind it. So bishop d6. Do you play c5, Danya, to gain more space? Or he just does it. But I was wondering if that allows black to play e5 in the near future to try to break down the pawn structure.
Right. What do you call the player who defeated Rogozin, or the Rogozin? You call him the Rastappen.
No.
Go.
No. Danya.
Vyacheslav Rogozin would be proud of this.
Danya. My friends. Come on, man.
My puns just went from riches to Rogozin rags. Okay. Anyways, let us now view the position on the board, having put that behind us. You're not commentating with me anymore, are you? I've forfeited my opportunity to commentate with you.
Just you start off really well with this it wasn't quite a Dracula reference, it was a vampire reference.
History
Vlad
Channel
Tepes in my head. I was like, getting all these.
Oh, don't get me started. I know more than I should about that.
About Dracula?
About Vlad Tepes, yeah.
Because you read The Historian?
I did read this. Oh yeah, the story. One of my favorite. That it might be the only 900-page book I read in like a week.
Yeah, so it's a good book. So I also
it is an
I think
amazing.
We briefly talked about it, but anyway, back to the chess, which is what we're supposed to.
I want to discuss the historian here. Okay, so b4 is white simply better here. Now we get these types of structures now in this fashionable line of the Queen's Gambit, Robert. But I never liked Black's position here. I feel like it's really cramped, and he's trying to break through and make inroads on the Queen side, but this could also backfire.
Yeah, here comes b5, and you can play c6. This bishop is ending up on c8, no matter which direction it goes from, and you have no space.
Knight e5. That bishop is buried.
Yeah, this is horrible.
Horrible.
And you're never getting out because I'm going to put my knight on e5. You're stuck here. Your rook on 8 also looks fantastic.
Disaster.
Just bad.
It's a disaster. Yeah. I mean, after knight e5, the only avenue that Black could potentially take is prying that knight away with f6 and then playing e5. So it's not like the bishop is permanently buried, but it essentially is, because I don't see a way to chase that knight away from e5. Now, knight e5 isn't even necessary in and of itself. Black is not threatening e5.
But bishop d6 is coming, so that's why I'm trying to make sure I avoid that.
That is true. So he does go knight e5.
Rook e7. Oh, so
knight e8 f6. That's a nice idea.
Oh gosh, see, Nihal does not like his position, but all things considered, that was pretty brainy. Like I was not thinking of rook e7.
It was 5-fed for sure.
Yeah, you know, your rook is blocking your bishop, it's blocking your queen, but it did free up the square for the knight. Here comes f6, here comes knight d6, and honestly, I don't hate his position as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, I was just laughing because I was briefly flirting with the idea of leaving the knight on e5 and then replacing with a pawn. So positional piece sacrifice. Actually, that might not be such a bad idea. F6, f4. But no, I mean, there's just no way.
Actually, it might be very good.
But there's no need. I think f6, if you drop your knight back, again, e4 is a very good countermeasure against Black's idea
Daniel,
of f6.
Look at the eval bar. It went up to plus 1.75 with this piece sack.
Okay.
And the essential point is that this is an open line.
Yeah.
These pieces are useless. The knight can't get out either because of all these pawns. I mean, this is just devastating. Hey, Daniel.
I guess I should give myself some credit there.
I kind of hope we see that now.
Yeah. I was half joking, but I mean, you know, every joke contains a grain of truth. And then the more I started thinking about it, the more I realized if Black's pieces are truly buried beneath the rubble that is the pawns on b5 and c6.
Wait, so it's true that every time you joke about not doing commentary with me ever again, there's some truth in that?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, that is essentially mostly truth.
Okay, got it. Well, I'm going to go back to the chess. I'm going to pretend like I'm not sad to hear that.
Sad.
He gives up this pawn on d5, and he at least gets his knight out to f5 or takes on d5 with a pawn, and the bishop is free. So I do think that this was a worthy pawn sacrifice, because on the other side, the piece sacrifice that you'd mentioned, he probably evaluated as like, no, can't deal with that. So
e4.
I would
tightening the screws.
Do you take on e4? Because there's a potential problem with the d4 pawn in some variations as well.
Right. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, I think that after e knight e4, if you take everything and go f6, one layer of troubles is replaced by another, because then your bishop might not even be the issue so much as the c7 pawn and all that jazz, and the bishop will still be buried. So I honestly think that Black's position is still miserable. Once again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the time situation, Nihal is soon going to be below a minute. This is not a position where you want to have less than a minute.
No, because at a certain point, Anton can just move. And by that, I mean just move back and forth, do something. And it's so hard to make a move with Black here because every decision may be an overly committal one. Like taking on e4, trading off pieces here, that can just leave you with a bind that you're incapable of getting out of. So he goes knight f5 instead, winning this d4 pawn by force. But does that actually solve his problems? Rook a to d1, bishop to c3. And that could actually help white with an attack on both the open line here and potentially an open diagonal that way.
Yeah. Can I redeem myself? Yeah, what did Anton's publicist do to the c8 bishop to turn public opinion against it?
Something about a smear campaign?
He mounted a Smirnov campaign against the c8 bishop.
Okay, got it. I knew that was coming. I'm glad that
Congratulations. You're really good at reading my jokes now, Robert. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to the chess again.
I think I made that one before, though, to be fair. So
I just expect these very corny jokes from you.
It's hard to do something out of Smirnov. You don't get much ice in the bucket, if you know what I mean.
Jeez.
Okay, so still the bishop on c8. And
Bishop
black
B4.
has this blockade. 95 also is interesting.
Oh, look at you going for that piece sack again. The point is after 95, pawn takes, the queen would be hanging on d5.
Rook e4, rook h4. I mean, there's just so many ideas here, and e5 is never possible. That's the problem.
Right. Well, rook
He's
e4
trying
is
to get
now
e5 in.
super tempting, though.
But then e5.
Yeah, e5 because you have queen f5, bishop f5 stuff. Nice.
I would go queen e4 maybe, and just like for now, I would hold this together. He does go rook e4. He sees something there.
So e5.
No,
Can I just take on e5?
Then bishop f5?
Then I'm sacking the exchange for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Why would you say that, man? That is such a dangerous, risky sacrifice.
Please, I'll take my rook, and then I'll just push my pawn up even more. Yeah, white's just crushing there. So he plays it, take on e5. You have to take back, I guess.
Yeah, you do.
With the pawn.
He does go bishop f5.
No. E takes d6. E takes d6.
Yes, it's simply no calculation. But bishop takes e4. Bear with me for a second there. ED bishop e4. What do you do?
Queen somewhere. C4 check.
Queen f7.
So
is that really that good?
It feels good, man. It feels good.
Feels bad, man. He does go queen c4 immediately.
Okay. So now he can move his queen anywhere, right? So he can go... Well, actually... There's some bishop b3 stuff at some point that I have to watch out for.
There's some issues. Maybe queen c3 to wind up that battery, but then fe and you can't take with a knight.
Right, because behind the knight is a rook that is no longer defended. I think he should just have taken on d6. Something tells me that was extremely good.
Agreed.
So queen e2.
Now it's complicated. The situation is complicated slightly. Nihal is definitely feeling good here, I think, in spite of the fact that I'm sure objectively his position is still miserable.
Yeah. So bishop f5 played, and can you take on d6 and put your queen on a2? Like, what happens in this position? It's the one that you've been talking about, Danya. It's probably the one that we'll see at this point. But ed... Well, you can't take with the bishop on e4. Well,
you take with the rook, queen a2 check.
Yeah, so I think ed is even better now than it was before.
There's some really cool lines there with a queen sacrifice, but let's see what he comes up with, because Anton's something he doesn't like about it. He is burning into his clock. G4? Is that a move? G4?
You are a mad.
And then ED.
But no, I can take on G4 and take on F3 there.
Yeah, but then I thought maybe something there. Okay, but anyways, they repeat moves.
Okay, rook E3 is like, if we see a draw in this position, that would be
that would be crazy.
But white is better even here because this pawn E5 is a goner. So now, among other things, knight to D4, bishop D4. Yeah, bishop D4 is good.
Yeah, that's a very solid move. Now, the funny thing is the bishop has finally come out, and black has gone from the frying pan into the fire because everything else has failed. All other systems have failed.
Yeah, knight takes D4, trade the queens, and F5 is hanging.
Yeah.
This is just crushing. So F3.
Ooh, but FE.
Then rook E1, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really nice move. You could also do this and put the rook on D7. I would be a little bit scared of rook E1, rook A1, but the problem is that pawn on C6 is so far advanced. It's driven right up black's position. It's going to be so hard to defend this, Robert.
And black is stuck with the rook here. So what you want to do is put pressure on one of this pawn. Because if you trade rooks, if the rooks are gone, it's actually not necessarily going to be winning for white. It often will be. Oh, now it definitely is. It has to be, right?
Yeah, he's infiltrated here with his king.
So rook
F5. You can even go into the pawn endgame here at this
take
point.
And king E5. Your king has won too much ground.
Yep. I mean, just flawless technique by Anton. And the quality of play that he's putting on in these games is impeccable, really. It's incredible. I mean, to outplay Nihal several games like this is very impressive, but we all know Nihal isn't going anywhere.
No, he's not. And well, the predictions had Nihal Sarin as a 62% favorite, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. And, well, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Let's see if we can reflect that, because it's 4-2 now.
Right, so that will be updated in a second. 4-2, Anton Smirnov with the lead. And the odds at the start were 68% for Nihal Sarin. That seemed right based on the ratings heading into the match. But Anton, he's just kind of tough.
Oh, and this line now. Isn't there bishop d6, dc? And there's that idea with the Greek gift sacrifice with queen h5, knight e4. Have you seen that one before?
I've seen it so many times. In fact, I saw it happen in the Speeches Championship Grand Prix the other day. And that's why he played this. So let's just show an example of, isn't it with the queen on d7, if you like this exact line where you...
Well, I think bishop d7 instead. Yeah, exactly, this line.
But the bishop has to be on d7, right? But the queen was already there.
So that's why he took with the queen, I think, because to avoid this line. I think he realized it.
Got it. Okay, well, now I know exactly what you're talking about, yes. And it's actually important that the bishop's on d7 because there are lines where the knight takes the queen and the bishop's hanging on d7 at the end. So it's like a very long sequence. We can show it to you some other time.
Yeah, exactly. But there is this line. Now, it's dc7, so I think Nihal is considering bishop h7 here. I cannot tell immediately why it doesn't work off the top of my head, even with the bishop on c8. I remember that the bishop is hanging on d7 in some lines, but I don't remember after knight e4.
It's because what is g6, and the bishop on d7 is important.
Oh,
because
you
knight
devil.
takes c5, knight takes d7.
That's right.
Now, if we trade queens, black's up a piece. And so if you go like knight f6 check, I have king g7, my king escapes and attacks your knight, I'm up a piece.
Nice.
And so in a position like this, you would have to play, I think, queen g5 and hope that your attack, whatever is left of it, will somehow make a draw, I think. Based on the evaluation bar there.
Yeah, that's a great catch, great thinking. And instead, Nihal...
Sorry, it's the bishop on d7 I knew was important for just when the queens get traded in that odd way.
Right. So Nihal has oriented himself toward a more conventional plan with e4, but I like the way that Anton has reacted to this plan by playing d4. And now if he takes on c3, he's going to have that d4 square at his disposal. And dc, bc, all of a sudden there's queen d6 winning a piece. So White will have to take with a rook.
Right. So you'd have, which you want to do anyway, but Darren is making a good point of you watch out for tactics down the D line.
Yeah. And Anton thinking about it.
I don't like that move. I actually think he should play e5. Open up this bishop. Right? Like, doesn't that look pretty reasonable?
Yeah, something about bishop d7 looks very awkward to me.
And he probably didn't want to give up some control of the light squares that his pawn was taking care of. And maybe he's just playing for equality at this point. Just say, let me play rook c8 and start trying to trade pieces. He does have the lead in the match. He is playing quite well. But bishop d7 feels a little bit too passive.
Oh, bishop e8 in every Russian school boy does. Solid chess by Smirnov. Bishop baby moves back at the d file. Okay, it's been a while.
Whoa.
Okay, I thought about this briefly, but didn't like it because I didn't see how White mounts enough pressure on that d4 pawn.
Yeah, because if you play b5, then the knight moves.
GC.
Wait, the rook's hanging at the end, obviously. So b5, dc, bc, cd, cd, dc, and I win your rook at the end. Nice. So a3 played.
Okay. So
now,
again, DC.
Yeah. Bring my knight to d4, play e5. Feels like black is in business.
Dude, all those squares, I mean, all those squares in the center are paving the way for tactics. Anton is trying to keep the tension. I can understand he's trying to squeeze more out of the position than just a positional advantage. That makes a certain degree of sense.
Although it could backfire because when you play a move like a5, you've given up control of important squares on the queen side yourself. So it takes on d4. So do you take on b4? I'm looking over there.
I guess, but why don't you take on? Okay, so he does. Now he takes on what, d4 and then b4? But there's rook c4 ideas he has to reckon with.
Yeah, so this pawn b4 is hanging. The d file still is under black's control here. Knight c4 play to try to win the e5 pawn if you go over there and take on b4. But can I play an annoying move like bishop b5? Lots of weird...
Yeah, it's annoying.
Pressure.
That's definitely the best way to phrase it.
And
it's
there's
just annoying.
A bunch of threats because if this knight goes to b6, for example, you have to look at this... Well, okay, I was looking at this d3 square. Like, do I have just...
Ooh. Buckle your seatbelts here. How does White defend against the pressure? There's discoveries on top of this.
Everywhere.
There really are.
Everywhere. And Anton, he's looking pretty calm.
Now, rook fd1, where exactly is the window?
And Nihal does not look very calm. He's like, what's going on here?
Shaking his head. Doesn't. Now, bishop d3, knight f3 at the very least.
Bishop d3, rook d3, knight f3 check. And the point is that the rook on d8 joins the party against this D3 square.
Maybe
Lots
there's
of
more,
arrows. Just not looking very fun. I think that's just good. Can I even take queen takes before? And
Yeah, I think that's a move in the spirit of this game. But does white have any intermezzos? Not really, because knight e2 check is also a possibility for black. I think he has to acquiesce to rook takes, but that is just lost. And you can tell, Robert, you mentioned this Nihal is, one idea. Rook t3, knight f3, queen f3, rook a takes d3, and knight d5.
Yep, knight d5
But
attacked here.
rook d5. Oh, and then e d5.
No, but
Pawn endgame is lost for white.
That's hilarious. We're just going down the line.
Pawn endgame is lost for white because
at the end of all this, a mass exchange, and then the king comes in and wins the d5 pawn. Just what a ridiculous sequence there. I mean, we went through that very quickly, but it started from
we might see it.
We might see it because knight f3 check, queen takes f3, rook takes d3, and then knight to d5. Right? If we get this, then this rook takes, and the pawn endgame. The pawn endgame is what's winning for black.
Yeah, I mean, of course, technically Nihal should not play knight d5, but out of frustration, I think he might do it.
Yeah, it's just
out of desperation.
All right, so let's return to the live position and just hang out and see what Anton is thinking, because even here, maybe after knight f3 you take with the g pawn. Is that somehow a difference?
Yes, it is, because white is e4 in that position. Whoa. Anton has gone for something I really don't like.
He has an extra pawn.
Yeah, but was it really the case that you could not win an exchange there without allowing knight d5?
I'm not positive. I'm just saying that even if he didn't win the exchange, he did steal a pawn, and they both have good knights, mutual good knights in the center.
But I think white's got some compensation. He's got the c file, rook c7. True. I'm telling you, I think that the game is going to turn around here.
Okay, I think that black's position is just too good. Like, you put your pawn in b5, you never have to worry about it. Oh, he's trying to checkmate him. Rook a1,
he is
queen
trying
e6.
to checkmate him. And queen c3, knight e2.
Oh,
but
can't stop the rook. So what do you do? Queen d1?
Queen e3? Ugh, that's scary. I confess.
And now it feels like white's just all sorts of tied down, because black's next move is going to be b5 here. So, like, if you play queen d1, you stop rook a1, but then black still plays b5.
Yeah, that is true. You've got to find a way to actively defend somehow. But
but then white can play queen h5. And the point is that I stop all these mating threats and I attack f7 on my own.
That's a very savvy move, queen d1. It looks very unassuming, but you're actually creating that threat. Maybe g6. Okay, g4.
Wait.
So he's
check,
extending the possibility of queen h3.
Check.
Oh, wait a minute. Queen h3, knight f3, and rook
That's
h1.
what I was looking at.
All my lands.
No, but knight f3, there's king g3 amazingly. Look at okay, we have to show this. We have to show the sequence so that we're not just talking. Everybody, check this out. What queen
Robert,
h6?
that's incredible catch.
So here, queen h6 check. If queen h3, Donna's idea was knight f3 check. And the point is that if you take a free knight, here comes rook h1, and I win your queen by distracting your king away. But instead, you have king g3, and now the queens are coming off, and you're getting checkmated, and your knight's under attack. So black is the one who loses the tactical sequence.
And now look at this. We've got intrigue in the game as well.
Let's go back to the game. Queen h6, queen to eight. Whoa, queen a3.
Back rank business. Back rank business for both of them.
Oh, gosh.
Queen a6. Now, wait a second, though. This looks very scary for black.
So queen e7.
Right.
That's pretty good.
Is that the most white can do,
Is there knight e2 check, though? And the queen h6 is mate.
Oh, what a mechanism. There is. Holy smokes. Are you kidding me, you devil?
I mean, you could take on a6, and after b takes, put your knight on b6 and put your rook on a7.
But that's a buzzkill, but that's probably what he should do, honestly.
Well, this knight e2 check idea, forcing it. What's this called? Anastasia's
I think Anastasia's. Queen e3 also keeps the queen.
Oh, it's happening!
He misses it!
Knight e2 check!
King f1. Oh, king f1, maybe?
No
oh my god,
way.
Robert, king f1, knight f4, and queen f1! Oh my god, knight e2, king f1, knight f4, king g1, queen f1.
Oh my gosh, if that happens.
I am going to lose it if that happens.
We need to show this so that we
have to. Will he see it?
Queen f1 check. If you go this way, you lose on g2. If you take, you get rook a1 checkmated on the back rank.
My heart is beating. He's got knight e2. He has to play king f1. Will he see it?
He might play knight g3. He played knight g3. He played knight g3.
Oh my God, he's got to repeat moves once, and now.
Oh no, he doesn't see it. He doesn't see it.
Okay, but he's still probably winning. He's probably still winning.
Oh my gosh, Danya, teamwork makes the dream work. If only he had a partner that he would be able to find that mate. This still looks really good. Knight.
Are we sure about this? Knight f1 and rook a3 maybe, but then knight c3.
Oh, knight e2 going back for the mates. King h8, no more checks.
Okay, what's the threat? Queen h4 is the mate.
Now queen g1, queen g1.
And queen h1, queen h2 on the last legs.
Oh my
King
gosh,
g3, but the back rank for black is weak.
You're right.
Oh my goodness, the back rank for black. He's
knight f4.
Oh, knight g1 takes with check. Knight f4 would have been even better.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh, Anton Smirnov.
He is a beast. He did miss queen f1, but hey, he found something good as well. Look at the tactics there.
Oh my gosh, what a find there. He missed knight f4 check, which was the mating sequence, but that is a hard move to play. When you have a double check on the board, you're almost always going to play that double check. But knight f4 down, a good eye by you. We had different checkmating patterns that we were finding. Whew, what an exciting finish there.
You saw most of that in the beginning. That was an unbelievable game.
Oh my gosh. And now while we have a quick moment to take a breath, let's remind everybody that we have this adorable photo of Anton Smirnov. He's being quite a bully right now. And not only do we have the photo of him where you could guess the age, you can even play like a 5-year-old Smirnov, because our producer has put that position on the board. So that was the position from the game. He recreated that with the analog clock at all. 5-year-old Anton Smirnov. But how old is he now? 20? 19? However old he is, he's just such a phenomenal player.
He's a beast. He is so well-rounded. He's a great, just mature human being. I mean, he's got the whole package.
Yes, and as we see the live position in this game here, and we look at the ratings, by the way, Smirnov has surpassed Nihal. He is 30-27. Nihal down to just a lowly 3K. Oh,
terrible. Terrible, terrible. I don't think we can even watch him anymore with that rating. That's amateur hour.
Yeah, gosh. So 96 was the last move here. I like Smirnov's position, and we've been saying that quite a bit in recent games. And you can play knight to e5. You push
knight d5. I never like this line for black. I feel like white gets all the fun here.
For sure, and especially because this pawn is on h6. Because when knight e5 happens, you don't have f6 because the g6 square is no longer under control. You would like.
Seems like we're down again.
Oh. Well, we might still be live on other platforms, so
we probably are.
And yeah, Danya, this position here, it looks like white can just play knight e5 at any moment, but is black going to play c5? We've seen Anton Smirnov go for this idea from the black side. This doesn't stop c5 because I can.
Right. I mean, knight takes a4 and then c5 is possible. It's his idea to play queen a3, but then c4. I don't love what he just did there, Robert. Now I think Nihal is fine.
Yeah, this kind of expansion for black is helpful a lot of the time. He takes on d4, so he just wants actually to liquidate, and that helps him if he feels like he's going with a couple losses. He needs to just right the ship. Maybe a draw with the black pieces is what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, it probably is. And yeah, I mean, you got to hit that proverbial free throw. We mentioned this yesterday, especially with the black pieces. This might be the last game of the segment. The way it's going right now, though, I think it might be a quick draw. So we might see another one, and Nihal will have the white pieces. So he's playing this right, I think.
Yeah, right now it looks like just symmetrical position. The major difference, well, now the pawn went to a5, is black is playing a little bit on the queen side, is his pawn is on f3, black's pawn is on h6. Doesn't actually do all that much in the current dynamic. The king on d2 covers the e3 square. So I wonder who wants to get out of this time segment more. Nihal wants to stop the bleeding. He's been struggling against Smirnov. But does Smirnov really feel like he's the favorite in the quicker time patrols? We know how powerful Nihal is under those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nihal wouldn't mind going into the break. He's got an hour or 3 minutes. It's not like he's burning to play another game, but he wouldn't mind one either. I mean, he'll have the white pieces, so we'll see.
Yes, and I'm looking at Smirnov's clock, and I'm looking at the match clock. There are 4 minutes and 15 seconds remaining in this time patrol, and Smirnov has 3 minutes and 29 seconds. So I could actually see a draw being offered and Smirnov using the entire rest of his time before clicking the accept button, if he feels like he wants to get out of this time patrol. Same thing for Nihal.
Without a doubt. Now, the one thing that should be mentioned, this game isn't entirely devoid of life. I mean, it basically is. But Smirnov could try to push his pawns on the king side, h4, g4, g5 at some point. That could backfire, but it is a plan.
Yeah, they're moving too quickly for my arrows to stay there. They go. G4, G5. Here we are. That's the idea.
I think he'll do it. I think he'll do it. Yep.
Okay, he plays G4. The thing about G4 is it's risk-free because you don't have to play for G5. Like, if you, for some reason, don't want to, just don't do it.
You can make another million moves. And Nihal, Rook H8 is a very savvy move. He poises himself for that. But look at Anton bringing his king over to F4. He is definitely thinking about it. I think if Nihal plays it right, he can permanently discourage Anton from playing G5. But at least it's worth, again, applying that pressure on the opponent.
Right. So maybe B5. I mean, it's not necessarily worth it to push that pawn because then the rook is the C5 square if you push to B5. But white does look like he's making progress, and looks can be deceiving. Sometimes it is worth just remaining patient and saying, I know for a fact I have a draw at hand. But
one moment, Robert. I think I stopped hearing you.
Stopped hearing me? Well, that's probably beneficial for your ears. But just talking here now.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I don't remember.
Were you? Wow, the position really changed. Oh my goodness, I missed so much. Oh God, how will I ever recover from this? Ay. This is fascinating.
Yeah, this is just. And the thing about some endgames versus this one is the king can't get in because look at the scores: B4, C4, E4. Your king looks great on F4, but it can't go any further. H5 is covered, G5 is covered, so they're now repeating moves. And Danya, I mean, really, is there a player here that's going to play for the overall match and just say, let's spend the rest of the time and not make an immediate draw?
I would. I mean, now you've got to be a little bit careful because if Nihal doesn't offer a draw and you just wait until you've got 10 seconds, that could backfire somehow. Although even with 5 seconds, black has no way to make progress, just literally. So I think he does. I think he does.
And Nihal did offer a draw, and Smirnov he didn't decline. He made a move.
Declined it?
Yeah, he made a move. That's pretty funny. And maybe Smirnov saying, like, I get the black pieces in the next game. I prefer that in the 3-minute time control. Smirnov offered a draw, actually, and they've accepted it.
Okay, so you're going to get one more in.
One more game.
You're going to get one more in here. And all the white pieces. Smirnov, though, he's scored a couple of wins with black. He's feeling confident.
He sure is. And we get a queen c2 Nimzo. So I've always enjoyed the queen c2 Nimzo without really knowing the theory in it. But it's a fun opening. Here's c5. Will we get some of these aggressive lines with h6 and g5?
And these lines have been around for over 100 years. I remember Mikhail Botvinnik, early Soviet world champion, had a lot of games in this line. This is a very sharp line where white sometimes castles long. This could be either a quick game, but obviously there's a lot of theory here that's been developed.
Yeah, and some of that theory results in just like pieces getting traded in ways that you wouldn't expect. Other times, like, well, do I play bishop h4 or do I take on f6? Because if I play bishop to f6, you see some trades. White plays e3. Here we see the g5 line. So we're hopefully getting a more exciting battle. Knight to e4. And queen
e3.
Is queen a5, I think, is the theoretical move? I never know. Like, is it?
I never know. Knight c6, bishop. I mean, there's a lot of tempting moves to the untrained eye. I wonder how prepared they are in this line. I mean, they're both taking some time, but they're playing pretty quickly, which tells me they know this line. They're just kind of ensuring that they're remembering it correctly.
But this kind of line you can lose very quickly. From
either side, by the way.
Wasn't this a Nepo game against Hikaru? Something like this? It was like a very quick game.
Which ended in whose favor? Who was white? Black?
Nepo was white, if I'm remembering correctly. It was just like...
Yeah, I don't remember. Was it a classical tournament?
No, it was over during the pandemic, and I think it was like the Magnus Chess Tour.
But
I'm pretty sure it was just like he forgot his theory, and then all of a sudden his position completely collapsed. I could be misremembering the players, but either way.
Yeah, I mean, this could easily collapse for black. Look at the king. Look at the king. Look at his position overextended. And
here we see queen c4. So Anton Smirnov seems to know his theory because this position all of a sudden looks quite decent for black.
In fact, may I go so far as to say, okay, but wait a minute.
Oh, there's knight d3.
Oh, knight d3. No, clearly he knows what he's doing here. Rook takes d, both of them too. Rook takes d5, I guess. No, f3 is creating that f2 square for the king. I still think that if white gets out of this temporary bind, Black's king will have nowhere safe to go. Black castles, white has h4, undermining the h. Well, trying to open the h file, but that's not that dangerous. Obviously, black can deal with that as well.
This queen on a6 is a real hero because it protects the d3 square, so you have knight d3 check in the event of rook takes b4, but also patrols the 6th rank. So if your king starts feeling unsafe, you could play a move like queen g6 at some moment to trade queens off or offer the exchange of queens. So I actually think that I agree with you, Danya, that white's position does look good once the king gets to f2, the rook comes to d1, or you play h4. It just feels like black's position is holding on by a thread to some extent, and white is down a pawn, but is much safer tactically.
Yeah, and I think we might see h4. We do. And this is a very important moment for Smirnov. He can play rook e8. He can orient himself toward active defense, or he can go for something like queen g6. I'm not saying that move specifically, but something where he tries to throw water onto the fire. I think he's going for that second approach. He takes on c3. Let's see what he does now.
He could always throw in this rook e8, but you do have to consider the pawn sack on e3 by taking on g5, and it gets messy. And I'm not quite certain that Smirnov would be happy about those complications. So I noticed I put the rook a to e8, and you're like, wait, didn't you talk about earlier how you want your rooks to go to open file? Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I saw the eval bar jump. But I say rook a to e8 in this case, that way I can move my f pawn, and my rooks can be helpful shielding my king.
Yeah, he goes knight e6 instead. So the move hg here, sacking the exchange, that's no good because, again, the queen can swing to g6 at the appropriate moment, or it can come to a1. So the question here is, does Nihal take on d5, or does he do something to the effect of, well, what else is there to do? Rook b4? That doesn't seem to inspire confidence, but rook takes d5 opens up that d file, and white's king is also in, Manka-esque territory.
So what about rook a4? That way I stop your queen a1, and I throw an h6 g5.
Lovely. Moving with tempo. I actually missed that move. That's a good move, I think.
Well, you were just giving me the ideas, and I was like, wait a second. If I want to take on g5, of course, because you can't take with the h-pawn now, as queen h7 would be a checkmate. So if I can attack your queen and then take on g5 next, I'm ruining your structure on the king side.
Right. Now, exactly. So rook a4, h and rook a8 to h4. Exactly, Robert. I like it quite a bit. I think he's calculating that. I think he's going to play it.
Yeah, it's still not so easy for white because your king is on e1, and there will be a timely rook to e8 and things of that nature, putting pressure on e3. But it does start to have the feeling that Nihal's attack should be more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, not sure what else he's deciding. Oh, I guess rook a4, queen b6, I just noticed.
Oh, so the very direct attack on
just attacking e3. I think actually that's what he doesn't like about it. And this is the sort of position, Robert, where a single tempo decides essentially the outcome of the game and the outcome of the attack, because everything hinges on, tempo.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking at h6 g5, but you're totally right. Queen b6 hits e3 and then also protects g5. So the queen goes on a journey and takes some things and protects the king as well, and you're up 2-3 pawns in that variation. Rook a4
not quite my tempo. Have you seen Whiplash?
I have, yes. Which is very good, but also just like, in some ways, like horrifying movie.
Yeah, exactly how I would characterize it.
Yeah, poor Miles.
Queen b6, not quite my tempo.
Faster.
Right.
Faster. So
it's okay. Were you rushing? Or were you dragging? Okay, so king f2 defending the pawn.
That looks like a dragging move. What about f5?
That might be rushing.
f4.
I think you're rushing there.
But bear with me tactically for a second.
Rook takes h6?
Then you're...
No, I'm kidding. I think that's a great idea, actually.
I don't know if it works, but f5...
FG king f1?
f4. And queen g6 check, it looks like, oh my gosh, but knight g7.
That's a huge resource. And intermezzo FG.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a really interesting idea, Robert. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get active to save my king.
Well, he can also play... No, that's not good. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, if the h file just opens like that and then white swings his other rook around, I mean, I was thinking about d4 here to intercept the a4 rook. But I feel like that might be too much of a price to pay to give white such a huge pawn in the center.
Right. But it's a good idea.
I don't know. I mean, it could be considered.
Yeah, because sometimes when you're getting attacked, it's not quite worth... You're already up a pawn. So sometimes it is worth giving back your extra material if it saves your king. So d4 is certainly an option. F5, I might be just biting off more than I can chew with that type of move, but it looks interesting. I do give the e5 score to this bishop, though, and that looks not so great now that I look at it a little more.
Yeah, so they're going to, I think this is going to be a time scramble as both of these players are dipping into their time reserves. I mean, these are very difficult decisions with so much calculation to be done, but that's exactly what makes it fun. There's one crazy idea I thought of, which is knight c5 and potentially queen b2, forcing the queen trade, but it's way too bizarre and outlandish because white's got a million things he can do. Knight c5 hg, for example, being one of them.
Right, just to go for the attack over there. But then there is knight takes a4, so you have to be careful before you go all in for white, because I'm with you, that looks scary, but I do have that queen b2 idea that you...
Oh, yeah, that's right. I proposed it and then I missed it.
Yeah, just showed it really quickly that rook takes
a6
looks overwhelming because of mate, but there's queen b2 trading off the queens by force, so it doesn't actually work out for white. So he plays d4, takes Danya's advice. I see the eval bar shoot up there for Nihal Sarin, but it's still very complicated. So
extremely.
We have the bar to our left. We don't have the moves with it, but we see that white is 2.5 ahead. That's huge. But if you're playing this position, you're like, yeah, I feel like my position is pretty good, but I don't actually see the knockout. So it's very complicated.
I honestly don't. I mean, rook ac8, I could see a case being made, and people might laugh at me. I could totally see a case being made for black being winning here. I mean, you've got the c file, you've got the possibility of rook c2. Now, I can see obviously why that's not the case because there's no way to get a rook to c2. And white has preserved. Okay, so he's trying to get his queen to c2 instead, the next best thing, trading queens. It's not the same thing, though.
Yeah, and this bishop on g3 is going to end up on e5, Danya.
Yeah.
That worries me a lot.
And in the end game, it's important to point out, it's not like the attack fizzles out. I mean, white still has that h-file pressure going, in addition now to his passed pawns in the center.
Yeah, sort of favoring white, both in terms of tactical means and in the end game with these pawns here, or I should say the middle game. The end game could favor black because the outside passed pawns. So that's why you need the rooks on the board for white.
That is not a move you play if you like your position.
No.
Takes in d5, d6, that looks good.
Take on g5 and then d5, d6?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, Anton is trying to get his knight to d5, but it's too slow.
Can't you just play d5 yourself right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought maybe flicking an hg was good to open the h-file.
Right, it gives you also a rook g4 at a time.
But hg, there's an intermezzo knight d5, maybe not worth allowing. I agree.
Ooh. Give me access to the c3 square with a big fork. So that's a nice intermezzo with after hg. So he plays d5 first.
I think he's reached the same conclusion.
So, okay, now we'll see the trade. Or knight b5. Oh, he plays it.
There we go. Rook g4,
tricky. But rook g4, knight c3.
Or h5, shutting the file down. Oh my goodness. Wait, that's a royal family fork. Okay, and he stops it.
That's a great looking
Queen f5, though. Rook c2 would have been a threat there.
Oh, queen f5 was nasty looking. So instead
we see... now rook c8. This is not over.
No, but the king g1, and it does feel like the king is getting safer. So queen f5.
Yeah.
Go for the Danya.
Ooh. He's trying to fix that e3 pawn, but again, it just doesn't carry enough Tabasco sauce. Rook a7 simply, I think.
So for rook e8, rook d3. You can just play safe for white now. You're up how many pawns? 2 pawns?
You're up 2 pawns now more.
Make that 3.
and now you've consolidated.
Yeah, no attack whatsoever for black.
And that's a very prudent approach.
d7, rook to b3. Yeah, winning the b7 pawn. Here's d7. Forcing rook to d8, then you win the third pawn again.
Yeah.
Completely winning.
Barring some sort of time catastrophe, it's completely winning indeed.
Oh my gosh, but he has to win this, concretely here. King g3, king f4. That's probably all you need.
And that is... Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, the rook is hanging.
Oh, I guess, yeah, you can't go to f6 because of rook a6. So e4 or g4.
Nice win there by Nihal Sarin to end the 5-minute portion.
Big game, and he wins. The lead is down to 2. That is still a very hefty lead for Anton, who played, by and large, a tremendous 5-minute portion, but obviously much of the intrigue, Robert, still ahead.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, what a finish that was for Nihal Sarin, because that was a resounding victory. It looked like pretty clean on his part. Not perfect moves, but he had the advantage. He kept it, and that will give him confidence heading into the 3+1. We are going to take a break, and when we return, we will get into the quicker time controls of this Nihal Sarin versus Anton Smirnov match in the Junior Speeches Championship, brought to you by Chess.com and ChessKid.com. And we are back getting ready for the 3-minute plus 1 second increment time control of this matchup between Nihal Sarin and Anton Smirnov. Currently, Anton Smirnov, the youngster from Australia, leads with a score of 5.5 to 3.5. And the Indian superstar, Nihal Sarin, he needs to continue what he just did in the final game, Danya, where he won. He's rebuilding his confidence, and he is the presumptive favorite, according to the chess goals and smart chess predictions, to win it all.
He is, but we need to take this with a grain of salt because we need to look at some of these names that remain, such as Haik Martirosyan, such as Jeffrey Zhang, whose tour de force we bore witness to yesterday. Sam Sebian, each and every one of these competitors has a fighting shot to win the whole thing. But in order to make the predictions come true, Nihal has a Herculean task ahead of him. And obviously, even the winner of today's match has just absolutely extremely challenging trials ahead of him.
Certainly. And, we see that Smirnov, with that 2-point lead thus far in the match, he still is
It's interesting.
a slight underdog, apparently, according to the numbers that were the live odds, because of Nihal's prowess in the quicker time controls.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. And I guess that makes sense given the bullet. I mean, if we look at the original predictions, we see that Smarter Chess predicts basically a dominant performance for Nihal in the bullet. So I think that he has to keep this within 1 or 2 points going into the bullet, but somehow I don't think that the bullet is going to be one-sided. I think that Anton has shown himself very quick on his feet. His intuition is fantastic. I think he's underrated in bullet. I'm not saying Nihal is overrated, but it's going to be close, that's for sure.
Yeah, indeed. And before the match, you see there 68% favorite was Nihal Sarin, but as we have action take off in the 3+1, we'll see if he's up to the test, because Smirnov has been mighty impressive thus far. And for Nihal, he just hasn't quite found his footing. I haven't seen consistency from him. There were some critical moments where he had a good position, but he just faltered. And he's obviously better than what he showed in the first portion of this match. However, I have to give credit to Anton Smirnov, who has just challenged his opponent game after game.
Yeah, and Anton's technique in the end game and better middle games has been exquisite. He's handled so many of these positions with accuracy and with confidence, which is exactly what you need. What they need to do here is both of them need to adjust to the new time constraints. We've talked about how that can be difficult in the first couple of games, where you kind of adapt to, it's like when you live on the 3rd floor for a year and then you move to the 5th floor and you press the 3 button to come to the elevator. I don't know why I chose the numbers 3 and 5. I wonder. But it's kind of the same.
I thought you were going to say this was a walk-up, so your legs needed to get adjusted to the different walking. But, you're in an elevator building, so so am I. But
yeah, exactly. So, by the way, let me interrupt this incredibly profound sentiment by saying knight takes c5 is a threat here, followed by bishop c7. It was famously missed by Alexander Alekhine, I think, twice. And it's not that easy to stop. I mean, maybe you need to come back to f6 with the knight.
Yeah, that's a very funny sequence. You play f5, give that sort of stonewall defense.
But knight b5 is also a huge idea. So he sacks a pawn.
He does sack a pawn, but you get the bishop pair. And I actually think this is somewhat thematic, because at the end of this, we can just show the sequence. Knight takes, trade everything on e4. Then black has this bishop pair. You can even play, I guess, bishop e6 or bishop d6 if you want to think about getting this bishop on f4. I have to imagine that white is better, but how much is the vital question.
Right. I mean, knight e5 is also an idea here. White is basically, I think, spoiled for choice. And this is, this comes back to the notion of who handles the critical moments better and who handles them more confidently. This is where you can easily spend a minute and a half and not come to anything conclusive.
I was about to say that Nihal now is up on time. So we've been mentioning throughout the 5-minute portion, he was always behind. Right now, he has a slight lead on the clock. And Anton does a practical choice. He wasn't sure how to assess the changes after taking on e4. So he spent 46 seconds. He's like, I've already spent too much time. Let me play h3 and play a calmer setup. And here's your knight e5, Danya, and f4 is likely to follow at some point.
He preserves, for sure, a positional advantage. Nihal has not solved the problems attendant to his position. That knight on e4 is not stable. So this is easier to play for white. And one thing black could consider, knight takes c3. If bc You could think about an exchange sacrifice. I don't think he has enough, though, after c4 at the end of the line. So Nihal is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let's see what he comes up with here.
Yeah, and he plays bishop e6, not caring about this pawn on d5, which will go to e4, saying, have it. It's all yours. And I guess the bishop coming to d5 is what he considers enough compensation. And there are ideas of f6 as well. So just show that very, very quickly once we get the series of trades here. F6 would open up the rook on e8 to the queen on e4. So I guess tactically, the pawn is not hanging.
Right. Now, another choice for black. Does he go knight g3 and buy himself some time? No, he takes on c3. I was thinking about going c5 here, but now that doesn't come with such effect because the d4, well, he does it anyway, but the d4 pawn is very well defended. Queen f2 is a very typical move in these types of positions. Swinging the queen to h4, that's one possibility. He could also operate more on the queen side with something like queen b2 or a4, something a little bit more positional, or, of course, f4. But that would open up the possibility of c4 followed by knight e4. So another critical moment we see here, players digging into their time reserves just because things are so complex here.
He played f4, and you were just, that was the last thing you said, but I agree with you that c4 followed by knight e4 is something I do not like from White's perspective because the c4 pawn is hanging?
Yeah, I thought knight e4, knight e4, but I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're totally fine. But I think knight e4, knight c4, I can just move my queen to c7, and then I'm going to get c3 at the end. It just feels just very vulnerable for White. The pawn structure doesn't feel too good, in my opinion.
Right. I'm trying to make sense of knight e4, f5, bishop d7, bishop takes c4, but that all seems very, very flimsy. I mean, even if you take and go f6 there, I don't buy this. And Nihal is definitely trying to calculate knight e4, make sure that Anton doesn't have anything up his sleeve. Again, we've seen this, Robert, in the 5-minute portion. He needs to give himself a little bit of time. Even if he calculates this and it works, you cannot leave yourself with 5 seconds.
No, you cannot. And you also probably shouldn't play c4 and then think about the aftermath.
Right.
Because it's a very committal move. You no longer have an opportunity to take on d4 and use the c-file. He plays g6, but doesn't g4 f5 or even f5 immediately. You can even sacrifice an exchange in the f5 square because then black's king is wide open.
Yeah, you should have thought of the before math. Not the aftermath. But I agree. G4, F5. I'm going to pretend I was possessed by someone. I didn't actually say that, okay? I get these compulsions and I have to say something like that.
Well, I get these compulsions to sacrifice other people's pieces. I say it all the time.
I do as
F5.
Well. F5. Oh, yeah.
Just sacking the exchange in F5.
Yeah,
I'm ripping your king open. You have 28 seconds. But actually, Anton is spending quite a deal of time here. Nihal spent 49.5 seconds on G6, and now Smirnov is using all his time plays queen to B2.
Oh, it's a buzzkill. I don't see F5, and it's, again, we talked about it. It's easy to sacrifice other people's pieces, but Robert, let's be clear. I don't think White's compensation there would have been in any sort of question. The only question is one of degree.
Right. And now look at this knight on e4 planted in there. You can play f6. That's the important difference between White and Black's position is Black can play f6 to kick this knight out, whereas the knight on e4 can only be attacked by a bishop.
Buckle your seatbelt. Here we go again, and definitely things have turned in Black's favor, but I like the move rook d2. Take the knight on g4 if you're Nihal, and then put a knight on e4. Knights are very big assets in time pressure. Queen takes f4 here was a move.
Oh!
And rook e1, knight f1.
That was nasty after the game will show that.
I'm feeling it tactically today, but that wasn't that simple, the d5 was saying. But here, White is left with a knight. We have a bad knight against good bishop situation. Definitely Nihal in the driver's seat. Will he take this home? Now he comes on to the other side.
No, this is a smart play. He's playing a5 to go b4. He can play g5 at any moment as well. He can play on both flanks. And knight f1, knight to d2. So what? Oh, took there. The c pawn is
a3 though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
Watch out. Rook b2.
So knight g3 hitting this bishop.
I'm telling you, where there are knights, there is trouble. It might be a bad knight. There's always going to be trouble. But look at the queen. Now the queen is in trouble.
Queen
c1, rook b1. Where does he go? Rook b1.
Rook b3.
Uh-oh.
c3, good move. Queen c1, rook b1.
Queen takes c3 on his last legs.
Oh, he barely survived that. Yeah, bishop d3 is the calm move. And then I would play like e4 or something for White just to scare him.
Yep, and f5.
He's got to move something. He plays f5. He starts with it. And h4, nice
he's
move.
He's going to lose on time.
That's such a nice move, though, h4.
It is a nice move.
We're going to pull up the analysis board because we have to show that tactic that Danya spotted while we have a quick second here. He was saying that way back here, where was it?
A little bit earlier.
Yeah. Right here.
right here after
Queen takes
F2.
f4, ef, rookie 1 check, only legal move king a2, knight f1 check. King has to walk back to the first rank, and thank you for this rook on d2. I have 2 rooks for the queen. I also have an extra pawn. I can continue with my knight in the attack. This is just winning for black. So Daniel, great tactical vision by you. We're going to move back to the current game where we once again have this pawn on a6. So Smirnov sticking to this QGD with a6. And this game, Nihal plays e3 rather than getting his bishop on the dark squares outside of the pawn structure.
Yeah, and again, not to take anything away from the play in the previous game, Nihal played absolutely fantastic in time pressure, posed problem after problem, and just a little bit too much vacillation there. We saw this from Nihal somewhat in the 5-minute portion, and now from Anton here in the early going of the 3-minute portion, a little bit too much vacillation in critical moments.
Definitely the case, because Anton actually had quite a lead on the clock at a certain point, because Nihal himself spent like 40 plus seconds, I think it was 50 seconds in fact, and then he made his g6 move, and then Anton didn't play f5. He didn't feel confident punching his pawn through and sacrificing in exchange. Hard to blame him, because he is the one responsible for the results of the game, but we were looking at that like, you gotta go for it. And in this game, Danya, now they both have spent 32 seconds for Anton, over 45 seconds now for Nihal here. I mean, is this the thing you want to do here? I mean, you're spending so much time.
E4, I see, this is the right type of mentality. I think Nihal has to seize the moment. D5 was also tempting. Here, D5 is still very tempting, as is E5. E5 actually looks really juicy, because if knight D5, you take the knight, look at that pawn on E5. That's going to be a big problem, not to mention the positional deficiencies in black's. Oh, this looks very, very dubious indeed.
Suspicious. I mean, knight E4 takes on E4 with the bishop. Like, I'm already looking at knight G5, right? Just give me an attack everywhere.
If you're going to crunch on E6 or queen B3 in the mix as well, this is very, very bad for Anton.
You can also play the calm queen C2, but then you just take on C3 and not as aggressive as he probably should be.
Again, I would advocate for speed here. I would take and go knight G5 very quickly. And here, I think he finds a happy medium.
Yes, he has done it. He has played knight to G5, E6, F7, bishop F5 to defend E6. And
there's
I'm
so many tempting moves.
At G4. I know it's really risky, but you talked about sacrifice on E6, so I want to remove the defender and then play bishop takes E6.
Even knight F7 and queen F3 is an idea I've seen before. And it's actually very hard to prevent both queen takes F5 check and G4.
Right.
Because if king moves to E7, there's bishop G5.
I'm just going to show that real quick. Queen actually just might be great.
Because there may be king E8 there, but just to show the sort of flavoring here.
Yeah, that looks good. But he's spending a lot of time down here, so he plays G4.
He does play your move, as one grandmaster has recommended.
Unless F4 is also good, which it does look pretty darn good. Like F4, F5, just throw that pawn forward.
Yeah, bishop E6 I like a little bit less, because black can actually even maybe... No, I guess I thought he could maybe castle, but that resulting position is bad as well.
So, yeah, if I take a pawn and then get to run my bishop back, that doesn't look very good for black.
Right.
So takes knight E6, hitting the queen, hitting the C7, hitting G7, allowing F4, F5. It's too many problems.
He does play bishop E6, but look at the clock, Robert. 40 seconds. This might be a problem. Anton has to find a practical way to pose problems here, which is very, very hard to do.
It really is, because if you can't take on E6, I just stole a clean pawn, and now bishop D5, hitting the rook on A8, giving up my knight, but I'm saying your queen is being removed once we trade everything on G5. So it should just be good for white here. But I like bishop E7 as an attempt. 25 seconds counting down.
I like it too. He doesn't see what to do.
I think you have to play bishop D5.
Yeah, you do. Okay, he goes full on knight F7.
Okay, didn't see that one coming. So king F7, E6 check.
Whoa,
bringing the king out even more.
Drawing the king out, but what does he do after queen E6, queen B3 check? Yeah, that might be mate. Queen F3, queen F5.
Oh, that's just forcing.
That's crazy.
The king would have to go king D6 some point and try to run away, but I don't know if you actually get that far, because there's always queen F3 check. King's being hunted.
This is maybe just losing. You have to drop the king back, Robert, but that's terrible.
King takes D7, though. I like this choice by Anton, because he's down only one pawn, if I'm counting correctly, and it's not like white's king is super happy on G1 either.
It's thrills. White's king is so thrilled that the pawn is on g4 now. But f4, I think, just cements that bishop on e5. Now the c-file. The king has nowhere to escape simply.
Yeah, you would like to castle by hand to the queen side, but it's a bit slow. And
I like h5, though. He's doing everything he can to complicate the game. Now 15 seconds. Watch out. f4 I would play.
Okay, so queen f5. That's now a free square for the queen. Takes advantage of it. But yeah, black is still stuck. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It looks like you've made a little bit of progress here and there. But
you can never take the bishop.
Nah, you don't. Yeah, you don't want to take that. This is an issue. So rook e8. It's not threatening anything. The bishop is so well defended on e5. It steals the h-pawn. What a greedy
He just says, I don't care. I'm taking some pawns.
It's a free pawn.
It is. I don't think black has anything.
No, he does not. All he has is extra time. But he's down 2 pawns. He's about to lose, if he does lose this game, 3rd game in a row. So Nihal Sarin was down 5.5 to 2.5. He won the final game of the longest time control. He started off with a win in this 3+1 and looking in great shape to get a second straight.
And things, Robert, went wrong for Anton here as early as move 8 or 9. I mean, there was a disaster in the opening in that queen's gambit position. And now Nihal, fresh from the thrill of taking the h-pawn, now the queen redirects its attention to that long diagonal. Rook d1 here is good. Anton is surviving here. It's never over with this kind of time situation.
Right, because the queen can't leave f3 very easily because it's queen g4 check. So rook d6, can he take it? He does take it. And queen g4, king h1. So the queen, for now, covers the length of the diagonal.
Yes.
Seems like you're safe. So queen e2,
queen takes b6.
But you have no check on d1, so king d5. And then queen takes king back to d6.
Queen f3, maybe.
Nice defense.
Whoa!
Nice defense.
Queen d7, though.
Okay, plays queen g2. Still very good for white, clearly.
But wait a minute.
3 seconds. Oh my gosh.
He has this back to the wall. Rook c1, though. Rook e2.
Rook e2? Rook e2. Okay, now can you trade?
My lands.
Oh gosh, there's an attack on
h2.
h2.
He's got to make a move.
Oh, okay, this could be.
Is black winning? No.
Look at this pawn, c4. The rook can always come back to e8.
Though, it's too little, too late. Is it rook e8 in c4? You're right.
Okay, c4. Push that pawn.
Oh, this is a race. This is a race.
Rook f8 only move. Here comes c3, c2. How do you stop it?
c2 and rook f7.
Oh, here it go. Oh, here it is.
Black's
rook
gonna be winning.
f7. Rook f7. And he sees it.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But wait a minute. It's not over yet.
Check on g5. Check on d5. Oh, but you can't take on f7.
You can't take the rook. Holy smokes.
But I think it was a good practical try by Anton. It still feels difficult for white to defend. Queen.
And look at the time. 1 second. He's got to make a move.
Queen, where check.
Queen c3. Is queen c3 isn't winning?
Oh. No, it doesn't. But he's taking on a5, so watch out. The good news is the wrong pawn. The rook pawn is bad. Queen trades will often result. Not here, though. Queen b5. Can't take that queen.
Yeah, he should have. But he's going to interpose with checking to glue that time.
Oh, and he wins on the clock.
Oh, but there were no checks there because queen c3.
Oh, and he's just devastated. Look
at unbelievable.
And I guess in a way, it's like sort of karma from that very first game of the match when Smirnov lost on time in a position where he was a pawn ahead. There, Nihal was down a pawn, but still was fighting, fending him off. And just to show that position one last time, if again very quickly here, that in the final position, the problem for white was he knew that he couldn't give a check because in the interposing with check wins for black. You cannot stop my a pawn. Your king would have to already be blocking that pawn, and I can just shelter your king out. Here comes my pawn, escorted down the board to become a queen. So back to the live position. We have another Spanish exchange. So the double pawns for black on the C file, but a light squared bishop. So down here, we saw Nihal get a pretty good position earlier in the match, stemming from this opening. What do you make of this decision by Anton to come back to this opening?
Well, first of all, before I talk about this position, I think it's no surprise what Nihal is thinking about right now. He's thinking about that game. And that was incredible. Well, I think Anton's main weapon is the exchange by Lopez. It's not, his sideline. I think it's what he plays as his main line. So the key is going to be at some point here to prevent d5 in a more effective manner, because we saw that once he allows d5, I mean, he's basically doing the same thing, though. I don't like this. I mean, I feel like, again, they literally repeating the same line, Robert, but black was better at some point there.
Oh, black was significantly better. And that game was the one where I think it ended in a draw, right?
Yeah.
Where it was queen and bishop of opposite colors by the end of the game. But we did not like Smirnov's position, and he's also spending much more time. So repeating an opening that you obtained a bad position in and not changing anything really, getting low on the clock, seems like a bad choice.
I don't get it. I mean, look at the clock. Yeah, 2 minutes to almost 3 minutes for Nihal. And Nihal's mad. He is playing quickly, but he's not tilted. He's, okay, C3 stopping D4.
Mm-hmm.
Not that D4 needed to be stopped.
Keeping this pawn under check on C5 right here, or the queen and the bishop are lining up. That keeps the C file. You're forcing black's pieces to remain on the C file. Let me put it that way.
H5 is an idea here, trying to go for H4, forcing white's hand.
Risky though, right?
Risky, yes, it's true.
So you're giving the F5 square, but the problem is this knight's also coming into F4 for black. I think black's better.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how things could go south for black here, but I mean, is he better though? I would actually think that I think white's turning things around here a little bit. That knight on F4 is not as effective as it looks because it can be chased away with bishop E3.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, knight E5.
Oh,
okay.
never mind. As I said, black is better. Yeah.
Yeah, black is better, but not for the reason that I was thinking. I was thinking that black could take on E4 and play for F5 like he did in the other game, but bring the knight to E5. Okay. That's just extremely logical and takes here. So knight takes E4. There's and even bishop D5. Oh, watch out for
I was thinking
F3.
that. Yeah, I was thinking that white is better because Robert Hess said black is better. So one simply has to contradict Robert Hess.
I just was looking at knight F4, not knight E5, but can I just take on E4 and have good knight against bad bishop?
You absolutely can. You can also go F5. You can go for the whole shebang here. Does that work though? F5 and your ideas you mentioned of bishop takes F3. Wait, what does white do after F5?
Looks not great and to me over there.
Am I overestimating the
F5?
play?
There could be a rook takes D5, rook D1 potentially, just to get my knight to D6. I don't know if it works. Like F5, can I start with knight D6 somehow?
Ah, you clever. But then queen D6 and if rook D1, knight F3.
Right. I was getting too clever, I guess, where I was trying to pin you, but you said knight F3 check, you have queen G6 check, and then down goes F3. So I'm blundering left and right in this game. My tactics
not at all.
Not so great right now. So F5, can I just maybe my initial idea of rook D5 and then rook to D1 and then put my knight on D6 next.
Boring. No, just kidding. This is also very good.
I should have trusted my gut on that one. So actually, look what happened in the game. It's different than these tactical lines. He goes positional, taking on E4, giving himself a light square against a dark square bishop. Black is significantly better here.
Look at that knight. And let me tell you, Anton is not going to repeat this line again. And here comes F5. So he gets the best of all worlds. He's simply going to win the pawn on E4. This is lost, completely lost for white.
Yes, I think Anton has to stop playing this line because the second game in a row where it feels like he's floundering. His position isn't that good. He's losing time in the early stages of the game, and now he's also losing a pawn.
Oh, I'm impressed that Nihal has maintained his composure after that previous game. So much so, he's managed his time well. He's played a flawless game. Now he has to deliver in this winning position. We know what Anton is capable of when it comes to resilience, when it comes to finding chances in positions that people might just resign in.
So we see queen takes E4. If you take, you get into a pretty bad endgame. So it's queen H5, but knight queen G2 first.
What'd you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Bam.
I almost choked on my coffee. I love those.
Oh, but this is better because you win the C pawn. You can go knight E2 check, forcing the king to H1.
Nice.
And this is actually a very precise move order. I'm going to show this really quick. Not even worth explaining too much. But if you took on F3 first, instead of knight E2, G takes knight E2, king comes to G2. So you have the same position where you win C3, but in the game, the king was on H1 rather than on G2, and you just save yourself a tempo. So the king is on H1 in the same exact position, and so that's favorable for black.
Yep, and Hess taking no chances. Hess is certainly taking no chances, but neither is Nihal. He is taking his time here. He says, I'm not giving Anton a single inkling, a single scintilla of hope in this position, and he resigns.
No, not even an iota, not even a scintilla. Look at you with your.
Not even a synonym. I need a synonym for scintilla.
Well, it's a scintillating weight. Seeing you trying to come up with this.
Scintilla.
And we have the triangle pawn structure this time from Smirnov, a semi-Slav, instead of getting his little QGD with A6. So Smirnov is now changing his openings. And, we're getting a Cambridge Springs.
Indeed, Cambridge Winters, and
No.
the last commentary I said Cambridge Summers. So it was a different pun. Okay.
Oh, Danya, why do you do this to me?
Well, I cannot explain myself, but I always have felt that, practically speaking, wait, they already had this. Yeah. So they have, again, Anton repeats the line. Robert, I can't believe this, but Black is much worse here.
So I would believe it if he looked and studied and found a solution, because the position was not very good.
He hasn't. He's starting.
He did win that game, though. He won the game.
Yeah, but I feel like that's a thing sometimes you're tempted to do. You won a game, so you have that good memory of a line. But this line is terrible. Even knight takes d5. I don't mean to be so harsh, but this is horrible for Black.
Whoa.
Rook d5. Okay.
He said, what was that? Let me press my ear a little bit closer.
Naroditsky, in your face. Now, I still think white is better. Bishop d5, bishop d4, bishop b4. Is it that impressive, though?
b2, e5, all hanging.
Okay.
I'm into it. I like this.
I'm just riling him up. No, this is definitely the best the Black can do.
All right, so do I take on b2?
Well, you want to be careful, because bishop e5, there's bishop takes h7, typical tactical idea.
Right, but I'm going to go after bishop h7 with king f8.
Oh,
yeah, queen 6 is mate. I walked into mate.
Oh my god! I also didn't see that.
I gotta show it. I walked into a checkmate.
Bishop h7 here.
Oh my!
And queen c2, bishop h7 is really strong.
Bishop h7, king h7, queen c2. That wins
my
the
lands.
bishop
but
here.
Then after that, Robert, c5.
Right. So king g8 takes and c5 for Black. This
very important. Rook f1, rook d6.
Oh my gosh! I'm gonna take a breather. I'm gonna take some water here.
Right, you're fired. I mean, I think I can really handle this. You know, someone who doesn't miss mate in ones would be more fitting here. I do not have even a scintilla of doubt that I don't even know what I want to say. At least you know what you're talking about sometimes. I just don't know what I'm talking about most of the time. I'm just rambling on. But at least I don't miss mate in ones.
True, you don't miss mate in ones, and I made fun of Vidit for this, so somebody should clip it and ship it over to my buddy Vidit. I don't mind making mistakes. We're all human here. We make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I come up with good ideas. Many times I make mistakes and I blunder checkmate in one. So now I'm going to try to redeem myself.
I feel bad. Robert,
yeah,
you're irreplaceable.
Oh, well, you don't have to suck up to me to make me feel better. I'm okay. I'll be okay. But
you know how rarely I compliment you.
It's true. But these pawns here, b5 and c4. Oop, I just clicked on the name of the opening by accident. Here you have these pawns trying to make progress, but for now, white has stopped their
h4.
When do I get to play bishop c6? When do I get to put my bishop on a8 and try to checkmate you in the long diagonal?
When I feel like allowing it. Well, here's the thing. I'm worried about h4, h5, and Black has to go bishop c6 ASAP, because if he doesn't generate these chances, the pawns on the queen side, I don't see them moving very far. I mean, he can move the c pawn to c2, but even then, Robert, how is he going to follow that up? Okay, so Nihal decides to go after his pawns instead. That does make sense. Does he allow something like rook d8, though?
So trying to switch the open line with not just an immediate attack on the queen, but potentially trying to get after the king on g1. But I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out, because a7 is hanging. So if you play rook to d8, down goes a7. Are you really that comfortable with it? I would prefer to play queen b7 and try to get my queen to f3.
Ooh, that is a nice little maneuver there. And at this point, you have to just realize you're not playing this for material. You need to generate these mate threats, even if it means giving up all of your queenside pawns.
Right. And the a7 pawn, as you're pointing out, not really that essential here. It's more about the b and c pawns, particularly the c pawn. And if I can get my bishop behind my queen and deliver checkmating threat, I'm certainly going for that.
And taking Grandmaster Hess's advice, this is a critical moment for Nihal. He has to solve these problems on the long diagonal.
And after queen f3, so like rook a7, queen f3, if you play queen e3, I can even trade you on e3 and play rook c5 to win your e5 pawn. So if all else fails, maybe I can transition into an endgame where Black shouldn't really be in too much danger.
Agreed. Now, the one thing that concerns me, rook a7, queen f3, maybe there's rook c3, dislodging the queen, although queen e2 there. It's always tricky whenever there's that access to the long diagonal. It's always going to be tricky to fully rid Black of counterplay. He takes with a queen on a7. Interesting choice.
Okay. So if something about the rook being on a6 is better than it being on a7, perhaps, because of queen f3 is queen d5. I like that move.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Queen e5.
Right. He stopped bishop c6. That's the good news, but he allowed his pawn to be captured, and the bishop is almost certainly going to get to c6 at some point anyway.
Queen d4 here, like you said, black could even consider taking and going bishop c6. That might be drawable.
Or your move, queen e2, if you want to just use this.
But then rook d8.
True, true. And is that bad, though? He plays queen g5 to stop rook d8 and to attack the rook on c1.
Yeah. h4 is possible. I'm not sure about queen
don't
oh, no, wait. That blunders the rook. Welcome to the club.
You did that just to make me feel better. I appreciate that, Danya.
That is not true. But I appreciate you covering for me, partner. We're just out looking out for each other here, okay?
We do our best.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Can I play? Hear me out, Danya. c3, rook d8, queen d8, queen d8, c2.
Oh.
No, you have queen back to d2, I guess. But
no, you did. But still, that's at least a draw. That's a crazy idea. That's really nice. Show it.
So, all right. So king f8 I was showing it before. So king f8 played instead. Okay. And if rook d8 now, I guess you can trade. Well, you have to trade everything, right? If rook d8.
But you could play. Also, now you could play h4.
True. He plays rook to d8, so I think
we
see a mass exchange.
We are, and the question is: are black's passed pawns? Well, there's singular. Is black's passed pawn and the king strong enough to compensate for the rook? Now, black has to bring his king in. Black might win this. I mean, they're playing for three results here, Robert.
Yeah, white's winning because the h pawn. You mentioned the h4, h5. Okay. At some point, white's going to play h4, h5.
Hear me out here, though. This is hard to manage sometimes.
True. Bishop e4. Uh-oh. King c4?
I'm telling you.
You're right, because if the rook comes after the g pawn, you lose the a pawn, and then there's
now you're right though too, because h4. Here come the pawns.
Yeah, here they go. King b3.
But wait a second. He's going to take. Okay.
Bishop e2. Bishop e2.
Oh
he
my
attacks
God.
g4. Take on g4.
Oh!
There's no reason black should lose this game.
Rook a7, though. G6, very good move to stop white from creating a passer.
True. And
now black has a plan. F5, e5. He starts to try to create another pass pawn.
F6, e5. You're right. Oh, my God.
You gotta move.
E5.
Oh, my goodness. Black might win this.
You called it. How did you know?
I mean, it's just, I know these positions sometimes. There's so many pass pawn opportunities. But wait a second. Let's not bury Nihal. This is hard to win.
Oh, look at that rerouting to a4 though with the bishop.
B3 and king a2 there might have been winning.
Yes, it was. Bishop f5 check.
Oh, but that maneuver.
Oh.
Okay. Oh!
Oh no!
Oh my God!
Oh, h6. Oh. G5 only move.
Okay. Oh my God, he's losing now.
King c5. Is he though?
Oh my! Is he? It might be a draw.
What a game that was!
But rook g3.
Okay.
Rook h3. Oh, it's a draw by repetition.
Okay, that was ridiculous.
Wow.
We need
so many turnarounds.
We're going to bring analysis board very quickly. I mean, we just don't even have enough time to go through all of the complex variations that we were seeing there. I mean, Donna, you were calling it with at this moment here. B3, rook takes the king a2. You cannot stop me from playing b2 and winning this game. And very importantly, Donna, the h1 square matches this bishop. So exactly. Even if you get to play h5, it's still going to be a draw in this the event of something like h5 here. I can just take it. So what a turn of events. White was winning at the end of the entire position. Had he had more time, he could have figured a way out and played, like, I guess, some kind of rook g7, push the paun, but no time left.
This would be an interesting endgame to put in like a book.
Oh my gosh, this is just ridiculous. And look at the sharp line we're getting in the Botvinnik.
Oh, yes.
No rest for us, Danya. Our minds are probably just mushy right now.
Yeah, they are.
The players also are probably pretty exhausted after playing all this blitz chess.
Part of the fun.
Here we go. D5.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Botvinnik variation. It is one of the most well-studied variations in all of chess. It has been analyzed to the absolute core. It features a lot in modern correspondence games. I think the current evaluation is a draw. But as you can see from the position, this is not a symmetrical position.
No. And bishop takes d5 played very quickly by Nihal there. You can take on d5, take on b4. This is starting to open up 95. What is going on here? So
I have no clue, and I
Wait,
think
wait.
neither does Anton.
Knight c5, bishop c5, a takes b4 then? Was that like a tactic?
Ooh, that was a really interesting idea because that bishop would have been hanging. Now, what's going on here? Is white just winning after knight c3?
Knight c3, rook a5.
Queen e5, rook e5. Holy
Oh,
smokes.
God. John, this is too much. This is too much, man. This is too much.
This is crazy. I mean, every time the Botvinnik appears on the board, bishop f4, even a more level-headed move, might just... I feel like black has messed this up, though.
Because the king is in some serious
king,
danger.
and he has not generated significant attacking chances against white's king.
Although queen c6 does happen pretty quickly. And
Yeah, that is true. Made on f3. He does go next to rook a... Okay.
So he gives it up.
Will Nihal take it?
And then you play
and
f4.
then f4, but then bishop c5.
I like f3 more than f4. Just to,
f4 loses, yeah.
So f3, and then you can block with your bishop on e3.
But still, bishop c5, bishop e3, Robert, do I not have... Oh, I would love to just look at that position for 40 minutes, try to find something.
Yeah, this is an opening that we need them to play classical chess in, or at least rapid, because we don't have time to go through every variation. Watch out for bishop e3.
Knight g4?
Knight g4, right? There's knight g4.
But then bishop h4, and then there's knight e3. Maybe white goes, oh my goodness, knight g4, h4, queen takes g5. But then fg.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to show that. Queen g5. Say, please take me. I have rook h2. Not just check, but checkmate. But then you just take on g4. You're like, hey, I'm actually completely winning. So thanks for all my pawns on the...
Right, exactly. Just makes a lot of noise, but not a lot of results. He goes knight g3. I like this move. He continues the attack.
And not only is he continuing the attack, there's also potential to protect the c1 square if you're going to
h4.
Go try to promote.
So how does black follow through, though?
This game is just wild.
I love this. I mean, 2 days in a row now.
I don't know. Does my rook belong on the H file now that you've closed it? I want to bring my rook to D8, but I don't see what my rook does there either. So I'm sort of at a loss in where my pieces belong because they seem like
like
black's
the move
piece
king b7.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of but now b3 becomes a threat, undermining the knight potentially. So maybe black should play b3.
Yeah, b3 or rook to d8. I hadn't decided because b3 might allow rook a4, and the c4 pawn could become a target at some point, which is what's causing me a little bit of concern. But you might be right that b3 just shuts down white's plan of playing b3 ever.
I feel like you could combine the two, b3, rook a4, and then rook d8. But I agree, white can then move his d rook to a1, doubling.
And then eventually bishop e3.
I have a feeling that white is definitely objectively, in the eval bar, white is objectively on top, but it's not a significant advantage if black handles this well.
Yes. And Nihal, he's thinking
dipping
here.
Yeah, the clock is going to be a problem.
So he does play rook to d8, and b3 no longer is. It's actually very bad because I can just steal your pawn and everything is protected on d3.
Right. How does white untangle himself here is the question. I mean, so there's something like queen c2, queen a4, but that doesn't create, again, okay.
So he not only protects b2, he threatens rook d1 and b3, but the defending b2 is important because you can play queen e4 to trade the queens and then say my h-pawn is going to be dangerous.
All of a sudden, exactly.
I like that move. Wow, rook d2, what a calm move.
Very measured, cold-blooded, and again, tossing the ball right back into Nihal's court, and he's got 40 seconds. The shot clock is expiring here.
This is going to be really tough for him just because you are down some material, right? White has a rook for a knight. You don't even have a pawn for that exchange. And very importantly, down in the end game, I have this outside pass pawn that's going to be a big problem to stop, whereas black's pawns don't seem as mobile.
He goes king b6. I would try to flick in b3. White can consider b3 now, and if cb, rook ad1. However, then black can go b2. He goes rook d1 first, now b3. I like how Nihal has timed this, waiting for Anton to put his rooks on the d file. Now, the knight on d3 is very stable. For the most part.
a5. What a move.
Uh-oh. Whose pass pawns are stronger?
I think that black's, for the time being, they're stronger. Do I have to play rook a1 back? Because h5?
h5, he's distracting the queen, but what if you take it?
He's gonna go rook takes d3. I think he's gonna rook takes d3.
Bailout.
Yeah, he's gonna go for a bailout. He's gonna take on d3 here.
Yeah,
and
prudent. But white might be better there. Or is he?
So b3 is hanging. So watch out for that. Like if you take on e3, you have the intermezzo of taking on b3. So queen d5.
Let me tell you, black might be very seriously better here because he's got the more far advanced pawn majority.
Because bishop c5, you have to take with the king on c5, but even that
lands
okay for the time being. So what's happening here?
King b5.
King b5.
White
G4?
might have to go G4, G5, G6 very quickly. A4.
Right.
But look at Black. Black is coming much faster.
How about Queen A7? Can I give up my B2 pawn for a bunch of checks?
Perpetual.
And the
I like that
AF7
idea a
pawn is
lot.
also under attack. So now
Now, here's the
ready
thing.
perpetual.
A3, BA, you cannot go B2 because of Queen E2 check.
That's a good point. Takes, and there's Queen E2 covering the B2 square. So Queen F5 played. He's going to try to play F4 and then bring his queen into the game over here.
What about E5 threatening Queen F4? Yeah.
Well, Queen F4 is not entirely a threat, I don't think. Woo.
Was that a sneeze?
Yeah, that was. I was trying to hold it in. I have a tissue.
They're repeating moves.
I wish I knew I was going to sneeze. So I could have. So Queen E4 check.
Takes, A3, G6.
A3, G6. Oh,
Goodness. I don't even. My brain is. It weighs 1,000,000 pounds right now. I'm just like, I cannot. Wait, Queen F4 takes.
wait, no time. Now. 4 seconds for Nihal.
Yeah. He's got to move.
Do not play King H5. There's Queen H3 mate.
Do that. What does he do? I mean, his king is kind of stuck there. Queen F4 check is a threat.
How Queen back to... Oh, you can't go Queen E3 because then Queen F4 does trade.
Whoa. Queen F4 and Queen F3. He's going to the pawn check.
But King H5, King H6, King G7.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Okay, that's a smart move by...
He's got a perpetual.
Yeah, he's going to make the perpetual.
But how about Queen G2? Queen G2 and
King
King H5, Queen...
Oh, you
tricked
me.
on H3.
You tricked me.
It's a draw.
Good.
Holy smokes, what a game.
Good understanding by both of those guys.
Didn't I say the Bobinic was a draw? That was all theory.
Yeah, you did say that.
Plot twist, that was all theory.
Smirnov keeps his 1 point lead. We are down to stuff 20 plus minutes in the 3+1. I feel like, I mean, we've seen so much action that we have to be towards the end of this match, and yet we still have so much time remaining.
Incredible stuff. Game after game, they're putting themselves out there, and I love the variation in the openings. I love the fact that a Bobinic was played. Now, imagine analyzing the Bobinic in the pre-computer era. I mean, and it existed in the pre-computer era. That would be crazy.
It did. And, I mean, that's just very different type of chess. I mean, the sacrifices that are available now, thanks to the resources that the engine spot, it's crazy. It really is.
It is. Some of the absolute richest ideas occur in the Bobinic. In any case, we have another one of these Londons, but here we see a pawn on F4, which is not always sort of a cross, I would say, between a Stonewall and a London.
Right, because you have these pawns on F4 and D4, and that honestly looks pretty good for White, because you can play King F2, Rook H1 at some point and try to attack. You can push G4, G5. White just has more optionality here, and I don't like Smirnov's position.
Did he gift sacrifice?
Oh, that could create a hook with G4, G5.
G4, yep, indeed. By hook or by crook, White is going to make progress on the king side.
So why did he play H6? To stop any bishop H7, knight G5, right? Any of that kind of sacrifice. But
how about G5?
For black?
Yeah.
Ooh, you brave soul.
And then F6. I know. My Russian coaches would essentially... they would not be happy at this move, but I feel like drastic measures need to be taken. Otherwise, White can just steamroll black here on the king side.
I actually don't mind
F5.
it. Okay. So he plays F5, but that move I mind a little more. G5 for White feels good.
Or takes a knight E5.
That also looks good.
Yeah, he's spoiled for choice here. And I like G5 more, I agree with you, because then you preserve both the clamp and the attack on the king side. And he does that. Bishop E8 is an idea here, but this is nastiness.
King F2, Rook H1. Don't White's moves to some extent just play themselves?
They do. Yeah, I think Nihal should just let go of his computer and his mouse will just execute the moves.
Hey, sometimes you have to just move with your hand rather than with your brain, and this does seem like a position where that's the case.
Don't think, feel.
And he's trying to get to H4, but the problem is, with the king on F2, I would have taken on H6 and then played Rook H1 and just gone after H6 pawn. Now, if I take on H6 after G takes, there's no Queen H4 because the Queen on E7 covers the square.
It's becoming a little bit unclear. It's becoming a little bit messy. So again, we talked about this critical moment. You want to make a decision, and you want to do so in a decisive manner without wasting too much time. Anton has a 30-second time advantage that might serve him well as he defends. Bishop B5, he's taking the positional approach, but Black can take on F3 here, and there will be no knight to put on E5, Robert.
And King H7, Rook G8, who's really taking advantage?
No, this is turned around completely. Bishop B5 was, I think, a big-time step in the wrong direction, if not simply a big mistake.
I think the first misstep was queen to e1 rather than king to
Yeah.
f2 because the rook should be on h1 right now, and black is actually the one who's maybe getting an attack on the king side. Rook g6, rook g8, very
Black
direct.
better. Black might be better.
I like black's position.
And that's the problem. Whenever you open up your opponent's king's position, it always can backfire, right? Because if the attack doesn't go your way, the very same, the very same files that you opened in your favor are now working in your opponent's favor. And so Nihal tries to throw water onto the fire by trading queens, which Anton accepts. I would move the knight away because now I would lead that knight to e4. That's at least a possibility.
You have to watch out for d takes c5 because sometimes you can get away with temporarily sacrificing the pawn, but other times it's not so temporary. You just go down a pawn. So he did take on d4.
And now, does Nihal take on c6 and then ed and then direct his attention to that e6 pawn?
That looks pretty nice, though. This rook on g8 will swing back to b8, and black will try to open up the queen side. So he takes with the e-pawn immediately. Rook
May I
g6.
propose knight c6 to e4? Would be a great
That would
move,
be a
wouldn't
great
it?
move. I'm here for it. So what are you going to do?
Roll
Knight
change.
d8, knight f7, knight d6? Is that what you're going for? Because the thing is, you can't get to f6 anytime soon, and even if you could, you're blocking the defense of the e6 pawn. So because rook to g8.
First, you tie white down because that is a long maneuver. It allows several. Okay.
Rook g4 at some
He
point.
wants rook e1, knight f7, bishop d7, maybe. No, passive defense,
Bishop
but knight
h5,
f7, bishop h5. Good idea, prophylaxis. One idea: b6, knight b7. He can open up another avenue.
He's doing it. He's doing just that. Knight b7 right now. And you can't pile up pressure on the e6 pawn quickly enough because if your rook were already on e5 to take on e6, that'd be great. But your rook is sitting on h2 and not doing so much. So knight d6, knight e4, you can't stop it.
Right. Now, it's important to realize that's not the end of the world for white. He can take on e4 and brace for impact there by maybe preemptively defending f4. Or just leave that knight on e4, although this is definitely, I love the way Smirnov is handling this. And look at the time, 1 minute, entire minute up on the clock is Smirnov and timing knight e4 just when he doubles the rooks.
Now, rook e6 is a threat. So let me just show that. If you played
nice.
knight e4, but if you had played rook c7, rook e6, knight e4 check, there's bishop takes e4. And if rook e6, it looks like you stole a rook for a knight. There's bishop f5 with check. So I want to show that very quickly. And we'll return to the live position because they're moving so fast in time trouble.
Now, Anton's stopping d5. How does Nihal handle his defensive task? He's trying to get d5 in, and if rook d5, then maybe b3, c4 comes into play. This could spiral a little bit out of control for Anton.
Yeah, I would play rook f7 and then put my rook to the queen side. But he starts with rook d5 and king g6. So he just allowed the pawn to storm up. And he's not afraid of d5 because then he gets to undouble his pawn and say, we're just trading. We're simplifying here. I would be more worried about rook to b2 or rook to b1. I'm not sure which rook belongs there, but I'm just trying to bring my rook into b5.
Okay. We're seeing simplification.
So
c5. Okay.
So there's some rook d6 ideas. If you had rook f to c6, rook d6 check, and then take with the pawn.
King h5 maybe is his idea. But rook h1 and rook h4 checkmate.
That's mate. That'd be mate.
You can never forget about the idea of checkmate, even in the endgame. Rook. Okay.
I heard you. You were both looking at rook d6 check. We're trying to figure out when to time it. So
when to tie? Yeah. G4 is another idea in play. I actually think white is not worse.
No. I don't.
In fact, don't laugh. White might be playing for a win here.
No, white I think is playing for a win because you have a
D4.
more advanced passed pawn. The e pawn is stuck in place.
But here I didn't like rook d7, king f6, king e6, but white's king makes it to c5. But then comes that e pawn. I think Nihal has underestimated it. He's got to make a move.
Wow, he has no time. 2 seconds. He gets it off. Rook takes d6. Watch out for rook d3. Okay, black's going to win. Rook d3.
Yeah.
And
Are you sure? King f2. What do you do? Rook f3 and h4?
Rook d2. Oh my gosh, rook f3. He's going to go
what do you
for
make
the
of
pawn.
this? But
King
rook
g6.
a6.
I would play king g6. I honestly
because
would
now
play
h5,
king
h6, h5, h6. I think white has drawing chances here.
Yeah, because the king can't get in. This king needs to be able to
do. Rook h4 and f4.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely got to do it.
Rook f3, rook h3.
H7 maybe.
Oh, you have to calculate f4.
You got to do it. What is he thinking about?
He plays h7. He gets away
Rook
with it.
h2, e3, and f3. You got to shove that in. You got to try.
E3. I like it.
King
G1.
g1.
E3. Rook 8.
Oh my God!
And he wins. He wins.
No way, Robert. No way. What a catch! You saw that instantly.
Well, the thing I was thinking about your idea that you couldn't take on h7 no matter what, so I could play rook a8
E2. Wait a
Oh,
second.
no, he
E2.
blundered
No, he
back.
didn't.
He blundered back because
What should he have done? King E2.
And then Queen G3, Queen F3 check,
Oh
and you
my
win the
lands.
my everything.
Now King E2, was that winning for white?
Let us analyze. We have to analyze. We're going to bring up the board here. I mean, what just happened?
That is incredible. Rook H2, King D3. That was winning, I think. But E2, King D2. Wow, those crazy complications.
Yeah. Just very quickly, just going to this moment here. The whole point was that you couldn't take on H7 because I would throw a check in and get this rook, and then my A pawn would queen. So he checked, and then if this check, he put King G2, wrong direction.
King E2 wins.
Check,
incredible.
The king just runs away, and you can't stop me from queening or checking and taking here. So let's go back to the live position just to catch up. We have this theoretical line, which we saw in a previous match. I don't remember who was playing. Do you remember which match that was?
Oh, this opening? Yeah, I think that was Sadwani against Martirosyan, maybe?
Okay.
Or no?
I just remember us seeing this exact sequence.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. But I'm trying to put my finger on it. Okay. And that must be devastating for Nihal, Robert.
Yeah, that was...
I mean, crazy.
He was pressing. He was... Well, first he was pressing. Then Smirnov was pressing. Then Smirnov overlooked the fact that that pawn could run up the board. I mean, we could do, honestly, a 2-hour lecture just...
We absolutely could.
That was really something.
I think Nihal is handling this well. I mean, he's at least drawing this rook b. I think he's pressing again. Now, the advantage might be just symbolic, but he's definitely in the driver's seat here.
Yeah, and I think we should point out that if the queenside pawns, the D and A pawns for white, the A and C pawns for black, it should be an easy hold, despite the fact that the pawn structure is ugly. You just put your king on G7, everything's protected.
Right, and years ago, my first coach taught me that in these endgames, these pawns can actually be really good for defensive purposes because they can essentially prevent white's pawns from making any sort of progress. So, ugly exterior, but soulful interior. You know, it can actually be not that bad if you're trying to defend. So here, Sarin is trying to double rooks on the second rank. This is a pretty serious idea, Robert. What does Anton do?
I think he plays rook A3, very nice move because he's defending. No, but rook E2, I take on A7, I believe.
Rook G2, rook G1.
Oh, yeah, it's a nice little save here. So rook E2 looks nice, but rook A7, rook G2 is like, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble. But here, rook G1 forces the rooks off very importantly. And now it should be in a level endgame because all the pawns are ugly, despite the fact that white has a pass pawn. I mean, everything is isolated, so you're not going to get away with much here.
And he's seeing it. And it's a draw, I think.
Should be, but we've said that before, haven't we?
We have, yes. But A4, I mean, trade the C pawn for A pawn and okay.
Yeah, it should be actually pretty straightforward, honestly.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, these matches, incredible chess. Every single game seems to have its twists and turns. This game hasn't had enough twists and turns yet. I think one is coming, and one will be in store for us shortly.
The only chance white has was to play rook G4, rook G2, and try to get the rook behind the A pawn. Like, if this rook were on A1 somehow, then white would be in good shape. But now you just lost your A pawn for the C pawn, and this pawn's not going anywhere. Black no king G6. Watch out, because king G5, king F4, king H4. That's why
this is not over. So and F4 is a good move. Basically setting up that force field. Still, okay, yeah, don't go king H5. Actually, yeah, no, that's not good.
Yeah, this is making sure the black king can't move.
What does black do? Yeah, he wants to keep the rook on that second rank.
Yeah, he's just going to hang out. Like, if you ever go D4, D5, I'll just put my rook back on D2. My king can very quickly reroute here. Also, king H5, king H4 is not out of the question. And there it goes.
It's not far from out of the question. He can go king H4, king G3. Now, wait a second. King H4, rook F6, king G3.
Then king F1.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm attacking both of your points.
I'm just so excited. I feel like every game is going to result in something crazy.
Yeah. This one, not so much. And
I don't know. I'm calling it. I think that something interesting is still going to happen here.
Well, there's possibilities because black is so active here. But can I just go
now
H4?
you agree. Huh.
I always
thought it would be an easy draw.
Can I just go H4 and just move? Oh, so H4, king G3 was the idea. No, Daniel, we're very quiet because there's not too much to say about this position. Although he lost the D pawn.
I'm just waiting for things to unfold here.
Yeah, losing that pawn's pretty important. And yes, everybody, we know the score is 8.5, 6.5 in Smirnov's favor. We are dealing with a little bit of technical difficulties, so just bear with us. When this game ends, we are going to take a very quick restart so that everything rights itself. So just stay with us.
I do want
to game at hand.
Go to bat here for our production team. Our producer Bigfoot does an amazing job. He is not just alert, but with us every single second. So please understand that there have been issues with Twitch today, among other things. So we appreciate your patience, folks.
Absolutely. And F3, there's rook E6 check. So the rook will just follow the king. And then the king, once his pawn gets to F3, I can always put my king in front of your pawn. So that's why white is waiting for F3. Like, wait, you want you want your pawn to push the pawn? Isn't that getting closer to the queening square? It's not as much about that. But look at this, rook G2 check. He's causing some.
Well, this is the alternate Philidor, though. If you keep the rook on the F8, even without the H pawn, this is a draw.
Right. It is.
And a relatively easy one.
You can be tricked.
Absolutely.
Like defending your pawn for some reason, even though you don't really need it. So, yeah, you just go king G1 next.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. Yeah, black should just take the pawn and test him.
Yeah, but here, I mean, here you can just play rook A8. Exactly.
Yeah, and you can just get the regular Philidor, I suppose.
King in opposition. You rook G8 check.
Yeah,
it's possible. King F2.
That's it. Nihal offers a draw, which Anton
accepts. So we're going to be right back, everybody. Stay tuned. We're just going to fix the technical difficulties.